The boy on the straw is 8 years old, and he is dying of a thing I could fix for the price of a sandwich. I know the exact price, 120 rubles for 10 capsules, red and yellow, in a paper box with a green stripe. I have carried that box 10,000 times with my own hands. His name is Toma. His mother is called Nella. She is kneeling in the dirt of a house with no floor, wiping his face with a rag she has already wrung out 4 times this hour. The fever came the day before yesterday, then the swellings under his jaw, hard as walnuts, dark as a bruise that never finishes. This morning he started coughing pink into his sleeve. In this city they call it the gray rot, and they say it is the anger of a god. I am looking at it from an arm away, and there is one word going round in my head, and the word is doxycycline. I am not a doctor. I want that clear from the start, because everything that happens after this hangs on it. For 2 years I picked orders in a pharmacy warehouse on the edge of Moscow. Aisle 4, shelf 3, a plastic tray, a scanner that beeped when you were right and buzzed when you were wrong. Antibiotics live in aisle 4. I know their boxes the way a shepherd knows his sheep. Nella looks up at me because I have gone quiet. She thinks I am praying. Everyone here thinks I am praying when I am doing arithmetic. She has already paid for a cure. That is the thing that sits in my chest like a swallowed stone. 4 days ago, a chartered physician came down to the Reeds and sold her a bottle of pale water, 11 silver. I know what 11 silver buys in this city. It buys a whole month of a laundry woman on her knees at the river, or a winter coat, or grain for a family until spring. She gave him a month of her life folded into a rag, and he gave her a bottle of water with a little chalk in it, and he wrote her son's name in his book and went back up the hill. The bottle is still standing by the boy's head. She has been giving him a spoon of it every time the bells ring, because the physician said the bells matter. The bells do not matter. I stand up and my knees crack, and Nella asks me the question this whole city has been asking for 6 weeks. Is he going to live? Yes, I tell her, because I have decided something in the last 10 heartbeats, and I need her to hold on to it. I am going to bring him medicine. Real medicine. Tonight. She looks at my boots and my patched coat and the leather bag over my shoulder, and she does not laugh at me, and I would honestly have preferred it if she had. Here is my situation, quickly, because the sun is climbing, and the sun is the only clock that matters in my life now. 6 weeks ago, I rented a garage on the far side of Moscow for 4,000 a month, because I had lost my flat and my job, and a garage was the cheapest roof with a door that locked. The job I lost was the warehouse. A pallet of medicine went missing on a night I was on shift, and the shortfall came to 900,000 rubles, and my boss Vitalik looked at the cameras and looked at me and chose me. He did not have proof. He had a hole in the count and a picker with no family in the city, and those 2 things fit together nicely for a man who needed the problem to be over by Friday. So I signed a paper agreeing to pay back 600,000 out of nothing at all, and I moved into a garage with a camp bed, and every month a woman with a very calm voice calls to remind me what I owe. The garage has a back wall of old brick, and in that wall there is a door that has no right to exist. I found it on my 3rd night, drunk, looking for the fuse box. It opens at dawn and it opens at dusk, when the sun touches the edge of the world, and it stays open for exactly as long as it takes me to count to 60. I have tested this more times than a sane man would. It carries whatever is on my body, a coat, a bag, a sack on my shoulder. I once tried to drag a wheeled case through, and the door shut on it and cut the handle off clean, and I stopped experimenting after that. And on the other side is Merith, a kingdom with a king who died in the spring, a river called the Sul, a capital city called Dunhale, and a lower quarter called the Reeds, where the poor go to be forgotten quietly. I did not come here to save anyone. I want to be honest about the man I was 6 weeks ago, because a saint makes a boring story, and I was nothing like one. I came here to steal, a city full of soft gold and no cameras, and a dead at home with a woman's calm voice attached to it. You can see how the arithmetic went. I took a candle holder from a shrine. I took coins off a dead man in an alley, and I told myself the dead have no use for coins. I took a gold chain from a house where everyone in it had already stopped breathing. Then I carried it back through the wall and walked it to a pawn shop by the metro, where a man named Zhenya weighs scrap gold on a little steel plate and pays by the gram. 1,800 rubles a gram, he tells me, and then he takes off for the melt and the risk and the phase of the moon, and I walk out with less than I hoped and more than I had. In 6 weeks, I have paid off 90,000 of 600. At that speed, I finish when I am 41. That is the whole of my great cheat between worlds. I was robbing a graveyard on the installment plan. And then the gray rot came down the hill into the reeds, and I started hauling carts for bread money because you cannot rob a house that has already been robbed by a plague, and I started seeing it up close. Which brings us back to a boy named Toma, and a mother named Nella, and me standing in a doorway doing sums with my mouth shut. Dawn is gone. I missed it hauling a cart. The next opening is dusk, and dusk in Mareth means the middle of the night in Moscow, and I have 2,200 rubles on a card and a debt that eats everything else. 2,200 rubles. In this house, that is nothing. Back home, it is nothing. It is a takeaway dinner for 2 people. It is also, if I count right, enough medicine to empty this whole street of the dying. I sit outside the door on an upturned bucket and watch the sun crawl, and I have never in my life hated anything the way I hate that sun for the next 9 hours. Nella's daughter comes and sits next to me. Bina, 6 years old, hair like a chewed rope, absolutely fearless. She asks me if I am the man who talks to himself. I tell her I am the man who counts. She tells me she can count to 20, and then it gets boring. I tell her that is exactly the correct opinion, and she should hold on to it. She is warm. I feel it when her shoulder touches my arm, and I tell myself it is the afternoon, and I am already lying to myself before the day is even over. The bells ring for the 4th time. Down the lane, 2 men go past with a handcart, and there is a shape under the sheet on the cart, and the shape is not large. They do not hurry. That is what the 6th week of a plague looks like. Nobody hurries, nobody screams. The carts go by like carts of bread, and the city has learned to look at the wall until they pass. Marta comes out of the house across the lane with a basket of wet linen on her hip. She is a laundry woman with forearms like a docker and a face that has decided in advance not to be surprised by anything. She looks at the cart, then at Nella's doorway, then at me on my bucket. "How is the boy?" she asks. "Bad," I say. She nods once, as if I have confirmed the weather, and she goes to hang her linen, because there is no version of this week where the linen does not need hanging. The sun finally touches the roofs, and everything in me stands up at once, the way a runner comes off the line before he has decided to move. I run. Through the reeds, past the shrine with the candle holder I stole, out to the collapsed dye works where a piece of old brick wall stands in the weeds with nothing on either side of it. The air in front of the bricks goes soft, the way air goes over a hot road. I count in my head. 1. I step through, and the smell of a Moscow garage hits me, dust and cold concrete and motor oil. 12 minutes past midnight on the phone, I keep charging in there. Outside, freezing rain and a courtyard of parked cars and a dog barking 3 buildings away. I have never loved an ugly city so much in my life. The pharmacy that stays open all night is 9 minutes away. I do the 9 minutes in 6. The woman behind the glass is maybe 50, with reading glasses on a chain and a crossword folded under the till. I ask for doxycycline. 10 boxes. "Prescription," she says, without looking up from the crossword. Then she goes back to her word, and the counter between the 2 of us might as well be the wall of a fortress. I tell her it is urgent. She tells me that antibiotics go by prescription, and that this has been true for years, and will still be true tomorrow. She says it kindly, which somehow makes it worse. I ask for 1 box. "Prescription," she says again. I ask what happens to a person who cannot get to a clinic before morning. She looks up then, over the glasses, and tells me that a person waits until morning. Outside, my hands are shaking, and it is not the cold. There is a boy in another world with a lump under his jaw the size of a walnut, and he is going to wait until morning because of a rule written in an office. I try the second pharmacy, the big bright one by the crossing, a young man in a clean coat, 22 at most. He asks if I have the prescription in electronic form. I do not have the prescription in any form at all. He says he is sorry. He looks like he means it. Behind him on the shelf, in the section I could find blindfolded, sits an entire wall of the thing I need, 3 boxes deep, glowing under the lights like a joke about my life. I want to put my fist through the counter. I do not. I stand in the rain and I think, hard like a picker looking at a bad order. And then I remember aisle 4, and the little pharmacy near the market on Sadovaya where our warehouse used to deliver, and old Lyudmila Petrovna who ran it, and once gave me tea when the truck broke down. It is open. Of course it is open. That kind of place never closes because that kind of place is one woman and a fridge and a shelf. She recognizes me. Warehouse boy, she says, and she says it the way you say a name you did not expect to see again in this life, and I nearly lose it right there in front of the sanitizer display. I do not tell her about the door. I tell her that there is an outbreak somewhere with no doctor and children with swellings and blood in the cough, and that I need doxycycline, and I need a lot of it. She looks at me for a long moment. She is not a fool. She knows exactly what she is deciding. Then she asks how many kilos of body weight in total, and I say, I do not know. 40 children, maybe. She gives me a look that could strip paint and tells me that this is not how any of this is done. Then she turns around and starts pulling boxes off the shelf. 12 boxes of doxycycline, 120 each. 2 big bottles of paracetamol syrup for the little ones. A bag of the cheap rehydration powder, 4 rubles a sachet, and she puts in 30 of those. 2,080 rubles for all of it. I stand there holding a plastic bag with 2,080 rubles of medicine in it, and I do the other sum, the one I will do every single day from now on. 11 silver for 1 bottle of chalk water, 120 rubles for 10 capsules that actually work. A man on a hill sells death at a month's wages, and I am carrying life home in a bag from a shop that sells cough drops and hair dye. She catches my sleeve as I turn. Full course, she says. Not until they feel better. Full course. All of it. Every one of them. Or you make something worse than what you started with. I promise her. I say it fast, the way a man says yes to a thing he has not weighed, and I am already out of the door and thinking about the wall and the boy on the straw. Dawn in Mareth comes when it wants to, and it does not care that Moscow is asleep. I stand in the garage with the bag in both arms for 2 hours and 40 minutes, watching the wall, and I do not sit down once. The air goes soft. I count. 1, 2, 3. I step through into cold blue light and wet grass and the smell of wood smoke and something under the wood smoke that this city has smelled of for 6 weeks. I run again, down the lane, past the shrine, and Marta is standing in the middle of the lane with her arms folded, and she is not carrying linen, and she is waiting for me. She does not have to say it. I have hauled enough carts by now to read a face at 30 paces. He went in the night, she says, about 2 hours ago, quiet, while his mother was holding him. Then she stands there and lets me carry the whole weight of it without one word of comfort attached. I stand in the lane with a plastic bag in my hands and rein in my collar, and I understand for the first time in my life what 4 hours costs. Not 4 hours of my time. 4 hours of a rule about prescriptions, and 2 shop counters, and a man too proud to think fast, and a sun in another world that would not go down when I told it to. Nella is sitting in the doorway with her back against the frame. She is not crying. Her face has the flatness that comes after the crying is finished, and there is nothing behind the eyes but a job that needs doing. She sees the bag. She sees my face. And she says it in a quiet voice with no anger anywhere in it, and there is no anger in her face either, and I would rather she stood up and screamed at me. You said tonight, she says. I get down on the ground in front of her and I do not defend myself, because there is no defense, and because a man who explains himself to a mother in that doorway is a man I do not want to be. Then Bina coughs behind her, once, small, in the dark of the house. And Nella's head comes round so fast that something in her neck cracks. I am already moving, hands on the girl's jaw, under the ears, along the neck, the way I have watched the physicians do it while they charge 11 silver for the privilege. There is a lump under her left jaw the size of a hazelnut. Her forehead is hot enough that I feel it before my palm lands. 6 years old. She counts to 20, and then it gets boring. I get a capsule out of the box, and I put it in her hand, and I tell her that this is the strongest medicine in the world, and it costs the same as 2 eggs. She asks if it will taste bad. I tell her it will taste like nothing at all, which is the first completely true thing I have said in this house. She swallows it with river water out of a wooden cup. Then she looks at me, waiting, because she is 6, and she expects a miracle to arrive on schedule. Nothing happens. That is the truth about this medicine, and it nearly finished me that first day. It does not work in a minute or in an hour. It goes into the blood and it starts a fight you cannot see, and the fight takes a day. So we sit. Marta comes in and sits. Nella holds her daughter and does not put her down once, not to eat, not to sleep, not when her arms start to shake. Somewhere in the afternoon, a man in a gray coat comes down the lane and stands too long at the end of it, looking at this house, writing nothing, saying nothing. Then he goes back up the hill. I ask Marta who that is. She spits into the ashes. That, she says, is one of the Grand Physician's men. They come down to count the dead, because the guild is paid by the crown for every name in the book. I ask her how much. 2 silver a name, she says, and she watches my face while she says it, because she wants to see whether the foreigner is quick enough to understand what a number like that does to a man's arithmetic. I file that number away. I have no plan for it yet. I only know the feeling I get when a number lands wrong, and that number lands so wrong that my ears ring. By evening, Bina's fever is worse. She is talking to people who are not in the room. Nella looks at me across her daughter's head, and there is a question in her face, and I have no proof to answer it with. I give the second capsule at the bells. Full course, twice a day, and I write the marks on the door frame with a piece of charcoal so that I cannot lie to myself about which dose we are on. 2 marks. That is all the science I have. 2 black lines on a doorpost in a house with no floor. The night is very long. Around the darkest part of it, Marta boils water because I keep saying the word boiled until she gets tired of hearing it, and Nella wets the rag and wrings it out, over and over, the 4th time this hour. I sit against the wall with the paper box in my hands and I read the folded paper inside it by candlelight, the little leaflet nobody ever reads, and I have read it 4 times before the sky starts to go gray. And then, some time before dawn, the girl's breathing changes. It goes long and slow and deep, and her hair goes wet, and I put the back of my hand against her forehead, and it is like touching bread instead of a stove. Nella feels it a half second after I do. She makes a sound I have never heard a person make, and Marta puts both hands over her own mouth, and outside the first cart of the morning goes rattling past the door. The fever has broken. It is the first time I have ever watched that happen, and I am 28 years old, and I have to go outside and stand in the lane for a while. By noon, Bina is sitting up. By evening, she is complaining about the taste of the river water, which is the single most beautiful sentence I have heard in 6 weeks. And Nella goes out into the lane, still holding the cup, and she starts telling people. She does it loudly, and she does it badly, standing in the middle of the reeds with her voice cracking. She tells the whole street that the strange man with the bag has medicine that works, that it comes from beyond the world, and that it costs less than 2 eggs at the river market. 3 hours later, there are 19 people standing outside that door in the rain, and not one of them has come to look at me. Every one of them has come to hold out a hand and ask to live. 19 people and 110 capsules left in the bag, and every one of those people needs 14 capsules to live. I stand in the doorway and I do the sum, and the sum comes out the way it always comes out, and I understand that the easy part of my life ended this morning. 19 people. 110 capsules. That is everything I have, standing between me and a line of human beings in the rain. A full course is 14 capsules, twice a day for 7 days. That is what the woman in the shop made me promise, and that is what the folded paper in the box says. So 110 capsules is 7 full courses, with 12 capsules left over that are worth nothing at all, because half a course is a way of making the sickness stronger and the patient dead anyway. 7 out of 19. I stand in that doorway and I feel the arithmetic close around my throat like a hand. Marta comes and stands beside me and looks down the line and says the thing I have not said out loud. There is not enough, she says. No, I tell her. There is not enough, there will not be enough tomorrow either, and the line standing out there in the rain is going to be longer by dark than it is right now. Then choose, she says, because if you stand here being sad about it, they will start choosing with their fists, and I have seen that happen at a bread cart, and it is worse than what you are about to do. So I walk the line, I do the only thing I know how to do, which is look at each one and ask the questions a man asks when he is sorting a bad order. How many days? When did the fever start? Show me under the jaw, show me your hands, cough for me, and do it properly. And I learn the rule of this disease standing in the rain, one face at a time. The ones in their first 2 days come back. The ones with black fingertips and blue at the lips have gone too far down the road for a capsule to catch them. A young weaver, 3 days in, still on his feet. He gets one. A carter's boy 1 day in, eyes shining with fever. He gets one. A woman with a baby on her hip and a lump the size of a plum. She gets one. And an old man named Austri, who has been coughing blood for 6 days and whose fingers are already the color of a bruise, does not get one, and his son is standing right there holding his arm. I explain it. I explain it badly. I say that the medicine works on the early ones, and that giving it to a man this far gone spends a course that would have saved someone standing behind him. The son hits me in the mouth. He is not a big man, and it is not a good punch, and I take it standing because I have decided to take it standing, and my lip goes hot and salty. Then he starts crying in the middle of the lane, holding his father up with one arm, and that is a great deal worse to stand in front of than being hit. Marta gets between us. She tells him the medicine man is a fool and a foreigner, and that his father needs to be got out of the rain, and she does it in the voice of a woman who has been managing crying men in that street for 20 years. 7 courses go out, 7 names get charcoal marks on 7 doorposts. 12 people walk away with nothing, and I write their houses on the inside of my arm with a stub of charcoal because I cannot think what else to do with them. That night I sit in Nella's doorway with my split lip and my empty bag, and I understand, finally and completely, what my problem is. The medicine is not it. The medicine costs 120 rubles and sits 3 boxes deep on a shelf in a warm shop, in a city where nobody is dying of this at all. My problem is that I can carry only what is on my body, twice a day, and that everything I carry has to be bought first, and that I am a man with 2,000 rubles and a debt and a bag. Money, volume, and the sun. Those are my 3 walls, and I sit against a wet doorframe until the middle of the night, turning them over one at a time. In the morning, a young man in a brown robe is standing in the lane with a satchel and an inkhorn, waiting for me to wake up, watching me the way you watch a dog you have not made your mind up about. He tells me his name is Brother Fen and that he is a clerk of the death book of the ward of the reeds. He has come to write down the boy Toma, son of Nella, and he wants to know if there are others. I ask him how many names he has written since the spring. He does not have to look it up. 4,060, he says, in this ward alone, and there are 11 wards in Dunhale. Then he asks me, very carefully, whether it is true that the fever left the little girl in this house after a foreign man gave her a seed of 2 colors. Yes, I say. Then I say it again, louder, because he needs to hear it twice, and because I have discovered in the last day that I like the sound of that word in my own mouth. He sits down on the step. He sits the way a man sits when his legs have made the decision without asking him. Then he asks the best question anyone in this world has asked me yet. How many? How many what? I ask him, though I am already fairly sure what he is asking, and something under my ribs has started to climb a ladder of its own. How many seeds? He says. How many people? He has his inkhorn out already, and his book open on his knees, and his hands are shaking, and I understand that I am looking at the most valuable thing in this city. A man who counts. A man who has spent 6 weeks writing down the names of the dead, and would sell his own teeth for the chance to write one down that lives. 7 yesterday, I tell him. 1 the day before. He writes it. Then he looks up and asks the second best question. How many can you get? And there it is, the whole rest of my life, folded into 5 words from a skinny clerk on a wet step. Here is what I know by the end of that morning, because Fen and Marta between them lay it out for me like a map on a table. The Reeds hold about 9,000 people. Something close to 1/3 of them are sick already or will be by the end of the month. That is 3,000 courses. 3,000 courses is 42,000 capsules. That is 4,200 boxes. At 120 rubles a box, it comes to 504,000 rubles. 504,000. Less than the debt I owe a man in Moscow for a pallet I never touched. That is the price of the lower city of Dunhale not dying. I say the number out loud in a language they do not speak, and Fen watches me say it, and Marta asks what the foreign words mean. They mean I need gold, I tell her. There is no gold in the reeds. There is not one gold thing in 9,000 houses, and I know this personally because 6 weeks ago I went looking. So I go up the hill where the gold lives and where in 6 weeks of dying nobody has once come down to look at us. The merchant quarter of Dunhale stands above the river on dry ground where the air moves, which is one of the reasons the people up there are dying slower than the people down here. I walk up in a dead man's coat with charcoal on my arm and a split lip, and I knock on the door of a spice house with painted shutters because Marta told me the wife inside is 3 days sick. His name is Kabul. He deals in pepper and salt and dried lemon, and he has the face of a man who has been awake for a week doing sums that will not come out. I tell him what I have. He tells me to get away from his door. I tell him about a girl of 6 in the reeds whose fever broke in one night, and I give him the street, and I tell him to send a servant to go and look at her. He sends a servant. I stand in the rain for 40 minutes. The servant comes back and whispers to him, and I watch a merchant's face change, and I have watched enough faces this week to know when a sale is already made. Then we haggle because he is a merchant and cannot help himself, and honestly neither can I. He offers me silver. I tell him I do not want silver. He offers me more silver. I tell him silver is heavy and my back is the only cart I own. He asks what I want. Gold, I say. By weight, in small pieces, nothing with a crest or a face on it, and I want the weight of my thumb. He laughs at me. He says the weight of a thumb of gold would buy a horse, a cart, and the man to drive it. I tell him it would also buy his wife the next 30 years, and then I stop talking, which is the hardest work I do all day. There is a rule I learned at the warehouse from a supplier who used to eat men like me for breakfast. Say your number, then shut your mouth, and whoever speaks first pays. Kabul speaks. He goes upstairs and comes down with a leather pouch, and inside it are broken pieces of a chain and 2 little ingots the size of dice, and he puts the whole pouch in my hand. I put 4 capsules in his and tell him she takes 1 at dawn and 1 at dusk, that I will come tomorrow with the rest, and that if he stops when the fever breaks, she will die, and it will be his own doing. He asks why I am not asking for more. He is a merchant. He can see he has been undercharged and it is making him nervous. Because the rest is going down the hill for nothing, I tell him. That is what you are buying. You are buying the reeds. Then I walk away before he can start liking me. 31 grams. I weigh it that night on Zhenya's little steel plate in the pawn shop by the metro, with rain running down the security grill and a football match on a small television behind his head. Zhenya turns the pieces over with a fingernail. Where is the hallmark, he says. There is no hallmark. There has never been a hallmark on anything you have ever brought me. Family things, I tell him, from a village. He looks at me the way Marta looks at a stain on a sheet. He pays me 52,000 rubles for 31 grams, and I know he is shorting me, and I take it, because a man in a hurry has no position to argue from, and we both know it. Then he does something he has never done before. He lays the pieces out on a sheet of white paper and photographs them with his phone, and he says it is for the log, because the rules have got stricter this year. I watch him do it, and something in my neck goes cold, and I put the feeling in the same pocket where I put 2 silver a name, because I have 400 boxes to buy before dawn, which is where I hit my second wall, and the second wall is made out of an ordinary woman being sensible. Lyudmila Petrovna sells me everything she has. 41 boxes. Then she puts both hands flat on the counter and tells me that this is the end of it. She cannot order 400 boxes of one antibiotic into a shop that size. The order goes into a system. The system flags it. A person she has never met will telephone her with questions, and she is 63 years old and she likes her license. She also tells me, because she is kind, and because she has decided I am some sort of holy fool, that the big chain pharmacies flag repeat buyers, and that the young man in the clean coat has probably noted my face already. I stand in that shop with 41 boxes in a plastic bag and I feel the wall. Money I have solved for a week. Volume I have not solved at all. And then, standing in the rain outside her shop with a bag of 41 boxes in my fist, I remember the warehouse. Aisle 4 is human medicine. Past the loading bay, at the cold end of the building where we used to eat our sandwiches, there is a caged section with its own paperwork, and the boxes in that cage are enormous. Veterinary, powders and premixes for farms, the same molecules mixed for animals, sold by the kilo, and the last time I saw that price list, I nearly laughed at it. There is a veterinary pharmacy at the far end of the market. It opens at 8. I am standing outside it at 20 to 8 in the freezing dark, like a man queuing for a concert. The woman who opens up has a cat asleep in the window and a poster of a cow with all its parts labeled. I ask for doxycycline powder. She asks me what for. Calves, I say. She asks how many calves. I tell her a great many calves. She sells me a tub the size of a bucket of paint for 2,900 rubles. I stand at that counter and do the sum out loud in my own language while she watches me. This one tub holds as many doses as 380 boxes off a pharmacy shelf. It costs less than 25 of them. No prescription, no system, no flag, no polite young man in a clean coat. Nobody in that entire country cares how much medicine you buy for imaginary cows. I laugh out loud in the shop. She asks if I am quite well. I tell her she has no idea what she has done this morning, and I buy 3 more tubs and a set of kitchen scales for 600 rubles. Getting 4 buckets of powder through the wall is a comedy on its own. The door does not care about my arms, so I go through with a tub under each elbow, 1 in a rucksack, and the 4th swinging from my teeth by the handle. I come out into wet grass in front of the old dye works, drop the whole load and lie on my back in the weeds laughing like a lunatic, while the sun comes up over the kingdom of merit. Then the work starts, and the work is what actually saves this city, and it looks nothing at all like a miracle. Marta's front room becomes the packing house. The scales go on a plank across 2 barrels. Fen rules a page into columns. 6 women from the lane sit in a circle with squares of waxed paper on their knees. You cannot hand a dying man a bucket and tell him to guess, so we weigh. A dose of powder into a paper, fold into the basket, and 14 papers tied with a thread make 1 human being. The first day we make 40 bundles, and 3 of the women are crying by the end of it, from the plain fact of having something to do with their hands at last. We lose the first night's work to rats, so everything after that goes in a tin box on a shelf. There are no cats left in the reeds. Marta says they went into the pots in the 2nd month, and now the rats sit in the lane in the afternoon like they pay rent on it. Fen watches me carry the tin box past them and asks me, in his careful way, whether the vermin bring the sickness. It is a fair question from a man who has written 4,000 names, and I have an answer ready, and I give it to him standing up. No, I tell him. Whole houses go down inside 1 week. The mother, then the baby, then the man who came in to help carry water. Nothing crawling out of a gutter works a house in that order. That is people breathing on people. Fen writes it down, because Fen writes down everything I say as though it were law. Then he reads it back to me in his flat, careful voice, and I hear my own sentence out loud, and it sounds like something a clever man would say. The chalk comes on the 2nd day. Marta thinks of it, and it saves more people in the end than anything I ever carried through that wall. Every house that gets a bundle gets a ladder drawn on the doorpost in chalk. 7 rungs, 1 for each day, and the woman who brings the water crosses off 1 rung every morning. An empty ladder means that house is not finished. 7 crossed rungs means a house that has come through. You can walk down a lane and read the whole street off the doorposts without knocking on a single door. Fen falls in love with the ladders. He walks the ward every morning copying doorposts into his book, street by street, house by house, and I let him, because it keeps him happy and out of the packing house. By the 4th day, we are treating 206 people. By the 6th day, it is 590. And on the 6th day, I learn the next lesson. And I learn it from a roof mender called Den, who has 4 children and a wife, who left in the spring. Den takes his powder for 3 days. On the 3rd day, the fever goes, and he feels like a man again. And he looks at the 8 papers left in his bundle, and he thinks about his children eating. So he sells them. 8 doses for a bag of barley and a piece of bacon, and I cannot even be angry with him, because he did the arithmetic of a father and got the wrong answer for the right reason. 4 days later, Den is back on his mat with a swelling under his arm the size of a fist, and it does not answer to anything, and he dies on a Thursday, while his oldest boy is holding the cup. I sit outside that house a long time. Fen sits next to me and writes nothing down, which from Fen is grief. That is when I understand that handing out medicine is the easy half, and the hard half is making sure all 14 doses go down the throat of a hungry man in a starving city. So we change the system. Nobody gets 14 papers anymore. Everyone gets 1 paper twice a day from a woman who stands in the doorway and watches them swallow it and then rubs out half a rung with her thumb. Marta finds me 9 widows and 4 boys too small for the carts. Fen writes them into the book as counters. I pay them in bread and salt out of Kabul's gold. The counters are the whole machine. 9 widows with baskets and chalk, walking the same 40 houses every dawn and every dusk, standing in the doorway until they have seen the swallow. It is boring. It is unheroic. It is the least magical thing that has ever happened in this kingdom, and by the 10th day, the death cart comes down our lane twice a day instead of 9 times. Twice instead of 9. I stand in the lane the morning Fen brings me that number, and I cannot say a word for about a minute. He reads it to me again in case I did not hear it. Then he says very quietly that in 11 wards of Dunhale, his is the only book that has slowed down, and that people up the hill have started to ask why. The next morning there are horses in the lane, 6 of them, men in gray and green, and a captain with a face like a shut gate, asking which one of us is the foreigner with the powder. Marta steps in front of me, which is possibly the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do while holding a laundry basket. The captain does not draw anything. He looks past her at me and says the words that turn my whole life over. The king's daughter is dying, the little one. Get on a horse. I have never been on a horse in my life. I get on this one the way a sack of grain gets on a horse, and one of the guards has to hold my belt for the first 100 paces while the others watch and say nothing. We go up through the middle city, and I see what 6 weeks have done to the streets I have only ever crossed at night. Shutters nailed shut, doors marked with tar. A dog eating something in an alley that I decide not to look at properly. The palace of Dunhale sits on the top of the hill, behind a wall the color of old bone. Inside the gate, the air changes because they are burning juniper and rosemary in iron baskets every 20 paces. It smells like a very expensive kitchen. It does absolutely nothing, and there are 7 baskets in the courtyard alone, and I find myself doing the arithmetic on what those 7 fires cost in wood every day. They take me up 3 flights and along a corridor, and outside a painted door there are 7 people waiting, and every one of them turns to look at the man in a dead man's coat with a laundry basket under his arm. 4 of them are mages. I know because they wear the gray with the silver cord, and because one of them is holding a staff and looking at me the way a surgeon looks at a plumber who has walked into the operating theater. The oldest is Archmage Severin. He is maybe 70, with a beard like a cliff and eyes that have not closed in some time, and he asks me, before anyone has said my name, what my method is. I tell him I give people a powder twice a day for 7 days. He waits for the rest. There is no rest. That is the entire method, and saying it out loud in that corridor makes it sound like a joke I am telling at a funeral. He does not laugh. He tells me what they have done, and he does it plainly, like a man reading out a list of his own failures because someone has to. They have warded the room against corruption. They have cleaned the air until it hurts to breathe. They have burned the bedding and blessed the water and set a circle of 9 that held for 2 days and cost one of them his hearing. They have called the sickness by every name in the books of the circle, because a thing that can be named can be commanded, and it has answered to none of them. Magic works on what it can see and name, he says. Wounds, bones, fire, weather, if you are patient. He has stood over that child for 9 days, and he cannot see the enemy at all. And then he says the thing that makes me change my mind about him completely. He asks me whether the enemy is small. Yes, I tell him. Smaller than the eye can go. small enough that 1,000 of them could sit on the point of a pin, and they eat, and they breed, and they die like anything else that lives. The old man closes his eyes for a moment, and I watch a lifetime of certainty rearrange itself behind his face, and he says, very quietly, that this would explain a great deal. The other 3 mages are looking at him as if he has started singing in the street. He ignores them. He steps aside and holds the door open for me himself, and the 3 of them go so still at the sight of it that I understand an archmage of Marith does not hold doors. Inside there are 2 people at the bed, and the room smells of blood and vinegar. One of them is a physician in a black gown with silver at the collar, and he has a small silver bowl in his hand, and there is something in the bowl, and I know what it is before my eyes have finished adjusting. The other is a young woman standing at the foot of the bed with her arms folded so hard that her knuckles have gone white. She is about my age. She has not slept, and she has not changed her clothes, and she is the regent of the kingdom of Marith. Princess Ilyena, 22 years old. Her father died of this in the spring, 6 days after the first cart went down the hill, and the crown has been sitting on a girl who was supposed to have 20 more years of not needing it. And in the bed there is a child of 8 with wet dark hair stuck to her forehead, and her name is Nessa, and she is so small under that enormous blanket that my hands go cold. The physician introduces himself before anyone else can. Orville Vane, Grand Physician of the Chartered Guild of Physic, Master of the Pale Water, First Hand of the Crown in matters of health. He is beautiful, in the way of a man who has been paid very well for 30 years. Silver hair, clean nails, a voice like warm oil. He looks at my coat and my basket, and he smiles at me with real pity, and I hate him immediately and completely. He has bled her twice today. He explains it to the room as a mother explains a treat to a child. The corruption is in the blood, so the corruption comes out with the blood, and the balance is restored. She is 8 years old. She has been burning with fever for 2 days, and this man has taken blood out of her twice since breakfast, and charged the crown for the privilege. I ask him how many of his patients this year have got better. He says that the guild does not count in that way. I tell him I do, and I ask again, and he stops smiling for the first time. Ilyena cuts across both of us. She does not ask who I am or where I come from. She asks me what I want, and she asks it the way a person asks who has been lied to for 5 months straight. Not who I am, not where I come from, what I want. She has been regent for 5 months, and she has already learned that every single person who walks into a room wants something. I tell her I want to look at her sister's neck, and that I want to do it now, while the sun is still on this side of the roof and there is a day left to spend. She lets me. Vane objects. She lifts one hand about the height of her hip, and he stops talking, and I file that away too, because a girl who can silence a man like that with a hand at her hip is not a decoration. Under the jaw, both sides, hard and hot. Under the arm, a swelling the size of a hen's egg. The fever has been on her since the day before yesterday, and the cough is dry and there is no blood in it yet. 2 days. She is early. My hands are shaking so hard I have to put them behind my back. I tell them I can treat her. I say it flat, without a speech, because I have learned in the reeds that people believe the flat voice and get suspicious of the loud one. Vane asks to see the medicine. I take a paper of powder out of my basket and unfold it, and a room full of educated men look at a pinch of pale yellow dust on a square of waxed paper. He asks what is in it. I tell him the truth, which is that I do not know how to say the name in their language, and that it would not help if I did. He asks where it comes from. I tell him from very far away, from a place he has not heard of, and every word of that is true. Then he turns to the princess with the powder held between 2 fingers, like something he has found in his soup, and he does the thing he has been building to since I walked in. He asks her to consider what she is looking at. A foreign man with no charter, no guild, no letters, no teacher, no name that anyone can trace, offering an unknown powder to the last child of the House of Marith. He says the word poison exactly once. He says it gently and sadly, as if it grieves him to raise it, and then he leaves it lying on the floor of the room where everyone can see it. Ilyena looks at the powder, then at me, then at her sister, whose breath is going in and out too fast like a bird in a bag. And Vane makes his offer. and I have to admit it is a good one because it costs him nothing at all. Let the foreigner give his powder, he says, and let him stand surety for it with his own neck. If the princess is not better by dawn on the third day, he hangs. If he refuses, then we all know exactly what he was selling. The room likes this. I can feel it. Everyone in that corridor and that room has been helpless for 9 days, and a wager is the first thing all week that has felt like doing something. Ilyena turns and asks me, in front of the mages and the guards and the man in the black gown, whether I accept the wager on my own neck. Here is what goes through my head in the 4 seconds before I answer, and I am not proud of most of it. 3 days is not enough. The fever usually breaks in 1, sometimes 2, but a child of 8 with a swelling like that could take 3 or 4. I know the medicine works. I know it does not always work fast, and I know it never works on schedule for the convenience of a man in a black gown. And I think about a plastic bag in the rain, and Nella's voice saying, "You said tonight," and I find that my mouth has already opened. I accept, I tell them, on one condition: nobody else touches her. No more blood comes out of that child. Not 1 spoonful, not 1 cup, not for any reason at all. Vane agrees so smoothly that I know I have given him something, and I do not yet see what. Then I turn to the princess and I tell her the thing I have been holding since I walked into the room, because she has the right to know what she is deciding about. The medicine that will save your sister, I tell her, costs less in my country than 2 eggs cost at the river market. A month of a laundry woman's wages would buy enough of it to empty the reeds. The room goes silent. Vane's face does something small and fast around the mouth and then goes smooth again. Ilyena asks me to say it again. I say it again. Less than 2 eggs. And I have watched a physician of your guild take 11 silver from a woman with no floor for a bottle of water with chalk in it, 4 days before her son died. She turns her head very slowly and looks at Vane, and for one moment I see something in that girl's face that makes me glad I have never had to be on the wrong side of her. Then she turns back to me and says 3 words that end the argument. Get on with it. I give Nessa the first dose and half a cup of boiled water with honey stirred through it, because the powder tastes like a mouthful of tin. She wakes up enough to drink. She looks at the ceiling for a while, and then she asks the room, in a small, clear voice, whether she is going to see her father today. Ilyena says no, not today, and her voice does not shake at all, and I have to go and look out of the window for a moment. Then we wait, and it is the waiting, not the medicine, where I find out what sort of person is running this kingdom. She does not leave. A regent has 11 wards, a council, a treasury with a hole in it, and a city dying at the bottom of the hill, and she sits on a stool by a bed all night and lets the kingdom knock at the door. Around the middle of the night, she asks me how I found the sickness in the reeds. I tell her about Toma, about being 4 hours late, about a mother who did not shout at me. She listens the whole way through without saying anything. Then she tells me that in the 3rd week of the plague, she signed an order to wall up a street with people still living in it. 40 houses. The council said it would stop the sickness moving north. She signed it, and it did not stop the sickness moving north, and she has the copy in her own writing with her own name at the bottom of it. I ask her how many were in there. 160, she says. She knows it to the person. Of course she does. So does Fen, so do I, so does everyone who has ever had to choose between 2 bad columns. Then she asks me, in a completely different voice, whether the powder would have worked on her father. Yes, I tell her, because she has not been lied to enough today. If we had started in the first 2 days, that powder would have worked on your father. She nods once and looks at the wall for a long time, and neither of us says anything else until the sky starts going gray over the river. The first day passes and the fever does not break. Vane comes at noon, looks at the child, looks at me, and says nothing at all, which is much worse than gloating. The second day the fever does not break either. The swelling under her arm is softer, and I know that means the fight is being won under the skin, and I have no way on this earth to prove it to anybody in that palace. That evening, the captain with the shut gate face, whose name I learn is Brack, comes and stands by the door and does not look at me. They have started building something in the courtyard. I can hear it through the window. I go and look because a man should look. In the yard below, 2 carpenters are putting up a frame with a crossbeam, working by torchlight and doing a careful job of it. Marta would tell me to eat something. I eat nothing. I sit by that bed for the whole of the second night with my hand on a child's forehead, doing the only prayer I know, which is arithmetic. Hour by hour, dose by dose. 14 doses in a course, 4 given, 10 to go, and a crossbeam in the yard with the wood still pale where the saw went through. And an hour before dawn on the third day, the child stops fighting the blanket. Her jaw comes unlocked. There is sweat standing along her hairline, and the heat coming off her is ordinary heat now, the heat of a girl asleep in a warm room. I sit there and I do not move for a full minute, because I have started to be superstitious about believing it too early. Then I say the princess's name out loud, and Ilyena, who has fallen asleep sitting up against the bedpost with her boots still on, comes off that post like a soldier. She puts her palm on her sister's forehead. She puts the back of her hand on her cheek. She looks at me, and she cannot make her mouth work. At sunrise, Nessa opens her eyes properly, looks around the room at 7 adults staring at her, and asks whether there is any of the white bread left, or whether Ilyena has eaten all of it again. There is a noise in that room that I can only describe as the sound of a house falling down. Severin sits on the floor. He does not sit on a chair. The archmage of the high circle sits down on the floor of the bedroom with his back against the wall and puts his hands over his face. Ilyena gets her sister's head against her shoulder and holds it there and looks at me over the top of it, and what is in her face has not got as far as gratitude. It is rawer than that, and I have to look away from it. I go outside into the corridor because I need a wall to lean on. Brack is there. He looks at me for a while, and then he says that he will have the frame in the yard taken down before the child sees it out of the window. Thank you, I tell him, and I mean it more than I have meant anything all week, because I have been watching that frame go up since the torches were lit. He says it was not for me. He says he has a daughter in the middle city who is 4 days sick, and he asks, like a man asking for a loan he does not expect to get, whether there is any of the powder left. There is. He is a captain who came for me with 6 horses, and I put a bundle in his hands in a corridor, and he holds it with both of his. By noon the whole palace knows. By evening the whole hill knows. By the next morning it is down in the reeds and coming back up again in a different shape, the way a story does. They are not calling me the foreigner anymore. 2 women at the gate go on their knees when I walk past, and a man I have never met kisses the sleeve of a dead man's coat, and somebody has decided that my name is Tem the Blessed. I hate it. I want that on the record. I hate it in a way I cannot fully explain, and part of it is Toma, and part of it is a pawn shop by a metro station, and part of it is 120 rubles a box. I try to tell them. I stand in the courtyard and I tell a crowd of 40 people that the powder is a thing anyone can buy, that it is sold by the bucket for animals in the place I come from, that there is nothing holy in it anywhere. They love it. They nod and smile and tell each other that the saint says he is nothing, which is exactly what a saint would say, and an old woman pats my arm. Fenn writes down 19 names that morning in the second half of his book, the half he started keeping without telling me, where he does not write the dead. And Orvel Vane comes to find me in the courtyard, in front of the crowd, with his silver collar and his clean nails, and he congratulates me, warmly, in front of everybody. He says the guild has watched my work with great interest. He says the crown owes me a debt no coin can pay. He takes my hand in both of his and thanks me for my service to the house of Merith. Then, still holding my hand, in the pleasant voice of a man asking after my health, he asks whether I hold a charter. I ask him what a charter is, and the whole courtyard hears me ask it, which is exactly the moment he has been waiting for since the child opened her eyes. He looks genuinely delighted. He explains it to the courtyard, loudly enough for the back. The Law of Merith, 3rd book, older than the king who died. No person may give physic within the realm who does not hold a charter of the guild. Not sell, give. The word in the law is give, he says, and he savors it like a man tasting soup. The penalty is the rope. It has been the rope for 200 years. It is what keeps poisoners and hedge witches from selling filth to the desperate, he says, and he looks around at 40 people who are all suddenly very quiet. Then he says the thing that is actually the knife. He tells them he will petition the guild himself, personally, on my behalf, for a charter of physic for the foreigner. The petition will of course be heard at the next quarter session of the guild, as the law requires. He is sorry that this cannot be hurried. The quarter session sits in 13 weeks. 13 weeks. Fenn's book says the 11 wards of Dunhale are burying between 200 and 300 a day. I stand in that courtyard doing the multiplication, with a crowd calling me blessed, and a man in a black gown smiling at me, with his hand still warm on mine, and I understand that I have just been beaten by somebody who did not raise his voice. Ilyina finds me on the steps an hour later. She has washed her face and changed her clothes and put her hair up, and she looks less like a girl who has been awake for 9 days, and more like the crown of Mareth, and she is furious. She tells me she will break the charter. She will have the law read out of the 3rd book and struck by Regent's order before the week ends, and any guild man who complains can complain from the North Road. And I tell her no, and I say it fast, before the part of me that wants to be liked by a princess can get a word in. She stares at me. I do not think anyone has told this woman no since her father died, and I can see her deciding whether to be angry about it. So I explain, and I keep my voice flat, because the flat voice is the one people believe. If she strikes a 200-year-old law to protect a foreigner with no name, her council will not say a word about medicine. They will say she broke the law of the realm for a strange man she keeps near her sister's bed. They will say it politely and often, and in 3 months there will be a different hand on the seal, and it will not be a hand that gives anybody a powder. She goes very still while I say it. Then she asks me how a hauler of corpses knows how a council works. I tell her the truth, which is that I have worked in a warehouse, and that a warehouse is a small kingdom with the same number of knives in it. She almost laughs. Almost. Then she asks what I want her to do instead, and I ask her for 3 things. I want the death books of every ward in the city opened to Brother Fenn. I want a cart and 2 horses that nobody will steal, and I want her to keep her name entirely off everything I am about to do. She gives me the first 2 by nightfall. The 3rd she does not promise, and I notice that she does not promise it, and I decide to be worried about it later. Nessa is sitting up by then, eating white bread with the crusts cut off, and she has decided that I belong to her. She wants to know if my country has dragons. It does not. She wants to know if it has horses. It has, in a manner of speaking. She wants to know what the word doxycycline means, and whether it is the name of a god. I tell her it is the name of a medicine, and she says it 4 times, getting it wrong in a different way each time, and then she announces to the room that she is going to call it doxa, because the rest is too long for a person. That is how the most effective medicine in the history of the kingdom of Mareth gets its name. Not from me, from an 8-year-old with bread in her hand. Within a month, the whole city is calling it doxa, and Fenn writes it in the book that way, and there is nothing I can do about it. I go back down the hill at dusk with a cart, 2 horses, 410 grams of merchant gold, and 13 weeks of guild procedure sitting on my chest like a wet sandbag. And on the 3rd morning after that, Vane makes his first move, and it is not aimed at me at all. The guard comes down to the reeds at dawn while the counters are on their rounds, and they arrest 3 widows in the street with the baskets still on their arms, giving physic without a charter. The captain who does it is a thin young officer of the guild watch, and Brack is nowhere near it. He reads the charge off a paper and does not look at anybody's face while he reads it. They take Hesta, who is 60 and has a mouth on her like a dockyard. They take Anna, who is 25 and has 3 children. They take old Vess, who cannot hear anything you say from her left side. Marta comes and finds me and tells me, and I have never seen her frightened before, and Marta frightened is the single worst thing I have had to look at in this world. I go to the jail. The jail of Dunhale is a stone shed by the fish market with a clerk at a table, and the clerk explains the position to me while eating his lunch. The women can be held until the quarter session, which is in 13 weeks. Or a surety can be paid, 4 silver each, and 2 silver a day for their keep, because the crown does not feed prisoners for free. 2 silver a day, the same 2 silver the guild is paid for every name that goes in the death book. It is the same coin, going round and round the same square, and every circuit of it costs somebody a month of their life. I pay for all 3, and it eats a quarter of Cobble's gold, and Hesta comes out into the daylight and tells the clerk what she thinks of his mother, and I have to carry her away bodily while she is still going. That night I sit in Marta's front room with the scales and the buckets and the bundles of waxed paper, and I know exactly what has happened. Vane will not touch me. Touching me would make a martyr in front of a city that has decided I am a saint, and he is far too good at this to make that mistake. He will take the widows instead. He will take them one at a time, and then he will hang one, and the other 8 will stop walking their rounds, and the machine will stop without him ever laying a finger on the foreigner. 13 weeks. 240 dead a day in the city by Fenn's count. I sit there and do that multiplication for the second time in 3 days, and it comes out the same, and it is not a number a person can hold. So I do what I did with the empty granary of a shop. I stop hitting the wall, and I start looking for the gap. Fenn, I say, and he looks up from his page with the ink still wet. Bring me the 3rd book of the law, and bring a candle, because we are going to be a while. He looks at me as if I have asked him to bring me the moon on a plate. Then he goes and gets it because he is Fenn, and by midnight we have a clerk's copy of the Law of Merith, open on a plank between 2 barrels with 4 candles round it. It is written in old speech, and it is a swamp. Fenn reads it out loud and translates as he goes, and every time he uses a word like, whereupon I make him say it again in language a stupid man can hold in one hand. We read for 4 hours. Marta falls asleep, sitting up. My eyes are burning, and the wax is running onto the plank, and somewhere in the middle of the night we come to a clause about apprentices. A chartered physician may take servants and apprentices under his hand. What they do under his charter, and the charter answers for them. It is 190 years old, and it exists because guild masters wanted free labor. I make Fenn read it 3 times. Then I sit back on the barrel and I start to laugh, and Marta wakes up and asks me what is wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with me. I have just realized that I do not need a charter at all. I need a man who already has one and has nothing left to lose. Every guild in every world has a man like that. He is the one they made an example of years back and forgot to finish killing. Fenn finds him for me in a day and a half. His name is Master Cassin. He was a chartered physician of Dunhale for 19 years. 9 years ago, he stood up at a guild session and said out loud that the pale water was chalk and river water and nothing else. Vane did not have him struck off. Vane did something much more elegant. He had him kept. Cassin still holds his charter. He still pays his dues. He has simply not been given a single patient, a single referral, or a single word from another physician in 9 years, and the guild sends him a polite letter every quarter reminding him that his fees are due. I find him in a cellar room behind a tannery in the middle city, with a stove that does not draw and a table with 3 bottles on it. He is about 60. He has a good coat that has been mended 7 times. He is stone sober when I come in, and the sober is worse than finding him drunk would have been. He is sitting perfectly straight at a clean table with his charter in a frame on the wall, waiting for a knock that stopped coming 9 years ago. I tell him who I am. He says he knows who I am, because the whole city knows who I am, and that he does not care for saints. Good, I tell him. I do not care for them either. Then I put a bundle of waxed papers on his table and tell him what it does, and I sit down and answer every question he asks me for 2 hours. They are good questions. They are much better than the mage's questions. He asks about the 2nd day and the 4th day. He asks what happens if you stop early. He asks what happens to the ones who are already blue at the lips, and he does not flinch when I tell him they die. Then he asks the one that matters. He asks how many I have treated and how many of those are alive. Fenn has the book. 641 treated in the reeds. 583 alive at the last count of the doorposts. 58 dead, and Fenn can name every one of them and tell you what day they started. Cassin sits and looks at those numbers for a long time. Then he asks me in a completely level voice what I want from him. I want an apprenticeship, I tell him. For me, and for Brother Fenn, and for a laundry woman, and for 9 widows and 4 boys, all under your hand and your charter, signed and witnessed and paid. He tells me, without any drama at all, that Vane will destroy him for this, and that it will take about a month, and that it will be done politely. Yes, I say, probably by the end of the month. And in the meantime, you will be the physician of record for every person the doxa saves in this city, and it will be written in a book in your name, and there is a clerk sitting outside your door right now who will write it." He is quiet for a while, then he stands up and takes his charter off the wall and puts it on the table between us, and he asks how soon we start. We sign the next morning at his table, with Fen doing the writing and a temple witness who charges us 4 silver for his seal. Marta signs with a cross, because she cannot write. Hesta signs with a cross, and then adds a second cross underneath, in case one is not enough. Old Vess has to have the whole thing shouted into her right ear twice. 16 apprentices of the chartered physician Master Casson of Dunhale. It costs me 6 silver in seals and fees and 1 bottle of good wine for the witness, and it is the best money I have ever spent in either world. 2 days later, the guild watch comes back for Hesta. She is on her round with her basket and her chalk, and the thin young officer starts reading the charge off his paper. And Hesta, who has been waiting for this moment for 2 days and has clearly been rehearsing, hands him a folded parchment and tells him to read that one instead. I am standing 40 paces away. I watch him read it twice. I watch him look up the lane at the doorposts with their chalk ladders and the widows in every third doorway, and then I watch him fold the paper and give it back and take his men away. Hesta gets an ovation from that street that I would happily have traded a year of my life for. She milks it. She takes a bow with the basket still on her arm. After that, we scale up, and for 12 days it is the best work I have ever done in my life. 3 wards instead of 1. Casson walks the lines every morning and looks at the ones I cannot decide about, and his eye is better than mine, and he starts teaching me instead of humoring me. The counters go from 13 to 40. Fen splits his book into a page for every street. Marta runs the packing house with 2 shifts of women and a fine for anyone who folds a paper sloppily. Bread has gone from 2 coppers to 7 since the spring. Marta says it is not the harvest because the harvest was good and that the granary men are holding it back for winter prices and letting the city learn to be hungry first. Money goes out and gold comes in. I set the prices myself and I never once apologize for them. The merchant quarter pays gold by weight. The middle city pays what it has. The reeds pay nothing, ever, not 1 copper, and I say that out loud in every street I walk into so that nobody has to ask. Cobble tells his friends tell theirs. A cloth factor pays me 80 grams for his whole household. A ship owner pays 110 and asks whether I would consider going into partnership on a spice route, which I decline. On earth, the arithmetic is beautiful and stupid. 400 grams of gold is 700,000 rubles from Zhenya at his shaved price. 700,000 rubles is 200 tubs of powder from a woman with a cat in the window. 200 tubs is 54,000 courses of medicine. 54,000 human beings sitting in a storeroom behind a market in a city where nobody has ever heard of merit. I cannot carry 200 tubs. That is the whole shape of my life now. I can carry 4 twice a day, and the sun decides when. So I start building on the other side, and the building is boring, and it is the reason any of this works. A storeroom in the ruins of the dye works, rebuilt with a roof. Racks along the wall, every tub numbered on the lid in charcoal, oldest first, because a picker knows that the shelf you take from is the shelf that goes rotten if you take from the wrong end. Fen makes a board with a column for every ward and a row for every day, and I teach him what a running total is, and he looks at that board the way other men look at their firstborn son. 800 treated, then 1,200, then 2,000 and change, and one morning the cartmen in the 3rd ward have to be sent for because they have got out of the habit of that street. And in the middle of that 12-day stretch, on an evening when I am elbow deep in a tub of powder with my sleeves rolled up, a woman in a plain brown cloak walks into Marta's front room and asks if there is a place at the table. Nobody knows her. She has come down the hill in a laundry cart with her hair under a cloth and one guard walking 20 paces behind her, dressed as a carter and doing an appalling job of it. Marta puts her at the end of the table with the new folders because she has never done it before. She folds papers for 2 hours. She is slow at first and then she is fast, and she does not once say who she is. Hesta tells her a story about a fishmonger and a bishop that I would not repeat in front of my own mother, and the regent of the kingdom of Marith laughs until she has to put her head down on the table. At the end of it, Marta counts her stack, tells her it is decent work, and says she can come back tomorrow if she likes. I walk her to the corner where the cart is waiting. She asks me why I do not take gold from the reeds. I tell her that a man who takes coin from the reeds gets 1 street, and a man who does not gets the whole quarter carrying his baskets for bread. She says that is a merchant's answer. Then she says she does not believe it, and she gets into the cart, and she looks back at me once from under the cloth on her hair. That night I lie on my camp bed in a garage in Moscow with a phone charging beside me and a city of 11 wards on the other side of a brick wall, and I am, for the first time in about 2 years, happy. Which is exactly when Orville Vane calls a special session of the Chartered Guild of Physic at the Guildhall on 3 days' notice. There is one item on the paper, the conduct of Master Cassin of Dunhale, who has bound 16 apprentices in 1 day, none of them of the guild, one of them a foreigner of no traceable house, in a matter touching the safety of the realm. Fenn brings me the notice, and he is grey in the face. Cassin reads it, folds it, and puts it in his coat pocket, and asks what time we start the rounds tomorrow. The guild hall of the Chartered Physic has a floor of black and white stone, and a ceiling painted with a man holding a bowl of blood up to the light like a prize marrow. 31 chartered physicians sit in a horseshoe of carved benches. Cassin and I stand in the middle of the horseshoe on the black and white floor, and I am wearing the best coat I own, which is a dead man's. Vane is charming. That is the thing I keep failing to prepare for. He does not accuse anybody of anything. He is sad and reasonable, and he takes 40 minutes to be both. He says that a master may of course bind apprentices. He says that 16 in 1 morning, none of them of the guild, most of them women who cannot write their own names, is a costume and nothing else. He says the word costume twice. It goes round the benches like a good joke at a funeral, and I watch 31 men decide that they are on the side of the man who talks well. Then he lets one of the young ones ask a question, because he is confident, and confident men give you an inch to look generous. The young one is called Aldous. He is about 26, and he has the look of a man who has been reading something he was not supposed to read. He asks, straight out, whether it is true that 600 people in the reeds have been treated with the foreign powder and that 583 of them are alive today. I say yes. I say the numbers slowly, and I tell him the clerk of the ward has the book with the names in it and will show it to any man in this room who asks. Aldous starts to ask the next question. It is the question that would have mattered. Vane says his name once, quite kindly, and the young man sits down. The vote takes 4 minutes. Cassin is struck from the roll of the Chartered Physic of Dunhale for conduct unworthy of a master. 29 hands go up, 2 do not, and one of the 2 is Aldous, and he looks at the floor while he keeps his hand down. Then Vane adds the second thing, which he has clearly had drafted since before he called the session. Any chartered physician who carries the foreign powder into any house of this city is struck off the same day, without session. 16 apprenticeships die on the floor of that hall in about a minute. Every legal thread I have is cut, and the whole thing has been done to me in a pleasant voice, in daylight, by the book. Outside on the steps, Cassin takes off the good coat with the 7 mendings and folds it over his arm, because it is warm, and because he does not appear to have noticed that his life has just ended. I tell him I'm sorry. He tells me not to be tiresome. He has been struck off in every way that matters for 9 years, he says. And today they finally did the paperwork. Then he asks me what we do about the rounds tomorrow, and I have nothing for him, and I go and sit on a wall by the fish market for 2 hours, like a man waiting for someone who is not coming. Here is what I have. 2,300 people alive in 3 wards, 40 counters who will be arrested one at a time, a storeroom full of powder, a door that opens twice a day, and a law that says the rope. Here is what I do not have. A single legal way to put a paper of powder into a sick person's hand in the city of Dunhale. Fenn finds me on the wall at dusk. He sits down next to me with the 3rd book on his knees, and he has 3 fingers stuck in it at 3 different places, and he is vibrating like a struck bell. He tells me he has been reading the guild's own chapter since the session ended. not the part about apprentices, the part about duties, which is much older and which he thinks nobody has read since the reign of the second Corwin. A chartered physician, he reads out, must attend any dwelling within the walls that tenders the guild fee of 4 silver, and must attend within the day, and may not refuse. And if he refuses, Fen says, running his finger under the line so I can see it too, the fine is 20 silver a house, and it is payable to the crown. I sit very still on that wall. Fen keeps reading because Fen does not know when he has arrived. I stop him with a hand on his arm. How many houses are there in the reeds? I ask him, and I am already standing up off the wall while I ask it. 412 occupied, he says, without looking anything up. He has walked every doorpost in that ward with a piece of chalk in his fist. 412 houses, 4 silver each is 1,648 silver, and I have a merchant quarter that pays in gold, and a storeroom that has already been bought and paid for. We do it the next morning, and we do it as loudly as it is possible for 16 people with 2 locked boxes to do anything. I walk into the guild hall counting house with Hesta and Marta, and 9 widows carrying 2 locked boxes between them, and Fen with a list of 412 houses written out in his best hand, street by street. I tender the fee, for every house in the ward of the Reeds, under the guild's own chapter, the 3rd book, the duty of attendance. The clerk behind the counter looks at the list, then at the boxes. Then he goes and gets his superior, and his superior goes and gets Vane, and it takes them 40 minutes, and I stand at that counter the whole time with my hands folded. When Vane comes in, I do not gloat, because I have learned from a merchant that the number makes the argument. I tell him the fee is tendered in full, and that the guild has until this hour tomorrow to attend 412 houses. I tell him that any house not attended is 20 silver to the crown, and that Brother Fen will be walking the ward tomorrow with the list and a piece of chalk, and that the crown will have his count by evening. 8,240 silver, if they refuse the lot. The Guild of Physic keeps its money in the same building I am standing in, and every man behind that counter knows exactly what that number would do to it. Vane looks at me for a long moment. There is nothing sad or kind in his face now, and I get my first real look at what is actually inside the beautiful gown. He says one sentence to me, quietly, so that only the 2 of us hear it. He says that I have no idea how long he has been building this, and how little I am in it. Then he turns to his clerk, and instructs him, in his warmest public voice, that the guild will of course attend, because the guild has never failed in its duty to the poor of this city. The next morning, 31 chartered physicians and their servants come down the hill into the reeds with their bowls and their bottles. It is the funniest thing I have ever seen, and I am not able to enjoy it, because they immediately start bleeding people. I have to make a decision on the spot, and it is not a clean one. I tell the counters to let them in, to be polite, and to keep the ladders going, and to say nothing at all while a chartered physician opens a vein. Then I follow one of them. Aldous, the young one who kept his hand down. He works his way along Cooper Lane with a face like a man walking into cold water. In the 4th house there is a girl of 12, 4 days sick, with a ladder on her doorpost with 3 rungs crossed. He starts to lay out his knife and his bowl, and Hesta, standing in the doorway with her basket, says nothing at all, exactly as instructed. The girl says it instead. She tells him she does not want to be cut. She tells him she is getting better, and that the powder woman comes twice a day, and that yesterday she ate. He puts his hand under the girl's jaw. He is not a fool. He can feel that the swelling has gone down, and he can see the sweat that means a fever broke 2 nights ago. He asks Hesta how many houses on this lane. Hesta tells him in the voice she keeps for bishops and fishmongers that there are 31, that 29 have ladders, that 4 had ladders and lost people anyway, and that she can take him to those 4 if he would like to see them. I watch him go down that lane behind an old woman with a basket, house by house, reading doorposts. He does not lance anything, and he does not open a single vein all morning. At the end of the lane he stops in the mud and looks back the way we came. Then he asks me, without turning round, how long I have known. I tell him about 6 weeks. He tells me he has been a physician for 4 years. He does the arithmetic on the people he has bled in 4 years, and he has to sit down on a doorstep to do it, and I leave him there, because there is nothing I can say to a man in the middle of that. Aldous comes to Marta's front room that night. 2 more come the night after. By the end of the week, I have 4 chartered physicians folding papers in a laundry woman's front room and asking Cassin questions like students. Every one of them is struck off within the month. Every one of them keeps coming. And in the middle of that same week, I go to see the Archmage of the High Circle, and I bring him a present that cost 4,200 rubles. It is a student microscope, black and gray, the kind a schoolchild gets for a birthday. It came with a box of glass slides and a lamp that runs off 3 batteries, and the woman in the shop asked me if it was for my son. Severin has been sending me letters. Careful, formal, one every few days, always with the same question underneath the politeness. What does the enemy look like? I set it up on the table in his workroom with the shutters closed, which takes a while because I have never used one either, and because the last time I looked into one I was 15 years old in a school laboratory. Then I put a drop of water from the horse trough in the palace yard onto a slide, and I get it into focus, and I stand back and tell the Archmage of Mareth to have a look. He bends over it and he goes completely still, in the way that only a man who has spent decades learning how to be still can go. The mages of the High Circle have a discipline called stillness that takes 30 years to learn. He holds it for about 4 seconds, and then he makes a sound like a man who has been hit in the stomach. There are things swimming in trough water. There are a lot of them, and they are busy and they do not care about him at all. Half a lifetime of a great man's certainty comes apart in a dark room with the shutters closed. He does not speak for 2 full minutes. Then he asks me, without lifting his eye from it, whether the thing that killed his king looks like this. Smaller, I tell him, much smaller than these, but yes, alive and hungry and ordinary, and it can be killed with a powder that costs less than an egg. Severin straightens up and looks at me, and his eyes are wet, and he says the thing that makes me like him for the rest of my life. He says he has spent 51 years commanding what he could name, and that he has been standing in a room shouting at an empty chair while the thief was under the floor. Then he calls in the whole circle, one at a time, and makes every single one of them look, and by midnight there are 9 gray-robed men in that room arguing about how small can go, and I slip out and leave them to it. 2 days after that, Orville Vane goes to the Crown Council of Mareth to have me declared a sorcerer and my powders sealed and burned. He has the ground for it. A man with no house and no papers, powders from a country nobody can name, a child raised from a deathbed in 3 days, and a guild that has been humiliated at its own counter by a stranger with a box of gold. What he does not have, because he has never once come down the hill to look, is any idea what is written in Brother Fenn's book. The council sits in a long room with the 11 ward banners on the wall, Lord Chancellor Renard at the head of the table, 6 lords, 2 temple men, Vane in his gown, and the regent at the end with her hands flat on the wood. Vane speaks for an hour. He is very good. He says nothing that is technically untrue, which is a skill I have come to respect the way you respect a wolf. Then he asks that the foreigner be put to the question, and that his powders be sealed and burned, and that the wards of the crown be kept from him, and he sits down to a table that is largely nodding. Ilyena calls me. I have one thing to bring, and it is a skinny clerk in a brown robe with a book under his arm. Fenn has never spoken in front of more than 4 people in his life. His hands shake so hard he cannot open his own book, and Cassin has to open it for him and hold it flat on the table. And then he starts reading out numbers in a thin, scratchy, careful voice, and everything in that long room begins to change. He reads the ward of the reeds, deaths by month since the spring, 206, 441, 690. He reads the week the foreign powder started. He reads the deaths after it, 91, then 33, then 19, then 9, and the last of those 9 he can name, and he names them, one after another, out loud in front of the Crown Council of Mareth. Then he reads the other wards, the wards where nobody has any powder at all, The numbers there go up every month and they have never once come down. Renard asks whether the guild keeps books of this kind. Vane says the guild does not count in that way. I hear myself say out loud, into a silent room, that the guild counts very carefully in one way, because it is paid 2 silver for every name it writes into the death book. So the guild's ledger of fees, I say, would tell this council everything it wants to know about the guild's ledger of the dead. I should not have spoken. I know it while I am doing it. Renard looks at me the way a man looks at a dog that has climbed onto the table, and then he looks at Vane, and he asks the treasury clerk to bring the guild's fee ledger to this room. Vane says that the ledger is a matter of guild privilege. Renard says that it is a matter of the crown's coin. There is a pause of about 6 seconds that I would not trade for gold. They bring the ledger. It takes an hour. During that hour, the Archmage of the High Circle asks the council for leave to speak. He tells them, in the voice of the most senior magical authority in the kingdom, that everything the foreigner has said about the small enemy is true, that he has seen it with his own eye, and that the circle stands behind him. Then he says that he was wrong for 51 years in public, in front of 6 lords and 2 temple men, and I would put that old man in front of a wall of spears without a second thought after watching him do it. The ledger arrives. Fen and the treasury clerk go through it together at the end of the table, and the numbers of the guild's fees for the dead match the numbers in the death books exactly, which nobody in the room finds surprising. What lands is the other column, the pale water, what the guild has taken for it, from the wards, since the spring. 19,000 silver and some change. From a plague. From people who sold their winter coats for a bottle of chalk and river water in the wards where the death books have never come down. Nobody says anything for a while. Ilyena reads that page twice. Then she asks Vane, in a perfectly polite voice, how many of those 19,000 silver bought a person a single extra day. He tells her, for the 3rd time that afternoon, that the guild does not count in that way, and this time the sentence lands in the room like a dropped plate. She has him escorted out of the room, not arrested and not disgraced. Escorted by 2 guards in front of the whole council. I watch the grand physician of the Chartered Guild walk the length of that long room with his back straight and his chin up, and I know, even standing there, that we have won nothing at all today. What we get out of that day is an office. The council cannot break the guild charter, and I do not want them to, and I say so out loud when Renard offers it. Instead, they make a new thing. It is the oldest trick in any world. The crown cannot practice physic. The crown can feed the poor, and it always could, and nobody has ever needed a charter to hand a hungry person a spoonful of anything. So, the office of Crown Almoner of the Wards is created that afternoon on a page with a seal, and the doxa is written into the law of Marith as an almsgiving, and not as a physic. Master Casson, struck off, ruined, 61 years old, is made the first Crown Almoner of Dunhale, and stands there holding the paper with the seal on it while the treasury clerk explains his salary to him. He takes it home and puts it on his wall in the frame where his charter used to be. He tells me it is a better frame than the charter deserved. After that, we go faster than I would have believed. 5 wards inside 2 weeks. 140 counters. 4 struck-off physicians training them, Cassin walking the lines, Severin's mages carrying water and boiling it in numbers that would take 100 men. The whole high circle of Marith, the proudest men in the kingdom, spending their days boiling water and burning bedding, because an old man with wet eyes told them what he saw in a drop from a horse trough. 9,000 treated, then 14,000. The death carts of Dunhale go from 31 a day to 9, and Fen has to start a second book, and the second book has more names in it every week than the first. I am on the top of the world for 9 days, and I would like to have them back, because I did not once sit down in any of them. Then, on a Thursday at dusk, I step through a warm brick wall into a cold garage in Moscow with 200 grams of merchant gold in my coat pocket, and there are 2 men standing by the roller door with a car parked across the entrance. One of them is holding up a folded piece of paper the way you hold up a card at an airport. He asks me, politely, whether I am the man who has been selling scrap gold with no hallmarks to a pawn shop by the metro. The station smells of floor cleaner and old cigarettes and radiator dust. They put me in a room with a table bolted to the floor and a window with wire in the glass, And they take my phone and my belt and 200 grams of the Kingdom of Merit. The investigator is called Sokolov. He is about 50, with reading glasses and a cardigan under his jacket, and he has a folder with photographs in it, and the photographs are of gold on a sheet of white paper. 9 visits to a pawn shop in 3 months, 460 grams in total, no hallmarks on anything, no documents on anything. 3 broken chains and a lot of small pieces that look exactly like pieces cut off larger things. He tells me there has been a run of burglaries in country houses along the northern road since the spring. He tells me he does not think I did those burglaries. He says it kindly, which is how I know I am in real trouble. He says what he thinks is that I am moving somebody else's gold, and that a man who moves gold for somebody else can either explain where it comes from or sit in this building while other people explain it for him. So I sit there and try to build a story out of nothing, which I am bad at, because I have spent 3 months telling the truth to everyone in another world, and it has ruined me for lying. Family gold from a village. Which village? My grandmother's. What was her name? Where is the house? Is there a will, a document, a photograph, a neighbor, anything? He writes it all down and goes away, and I sit alone in the room with the wire glass and start counting. Dusk in Mareth is at about the same hour as ours in this season, give or take. So the first opening I miss is tonight, and the second is at dawn, and there is nothing on the shelf of my storeroom but 3 days of powder. 3 days, 5 wards, 16,000 people on a course, and 800 of them somewhere in the middle of one, and a counter with a basket standing in a doorway waiting for the man who has never once failed to come. I miss the dusk opening, then the dawn, then the dusk again, because Sokolov gets the extension, because my grandmother's village does not exist, and the checking of a thing that does not exist takes time. I do not sleep at all in that building. I lie on a bench, and I do arithmetic on a ceiling. 240 people a day was the city before we started. 70 a day was the city 3 days ago. The number in between is the number I am making right now by lying on a bench in Moscow, and I cannot even tell anybody why. Sokolov comes back on the 3rd morning and tells me I can go. No charges. The gold stays as evidence in an open case, and my bank account is blocked while the check runs, and there is a paper I have to sign saying I will not leave the city. At the door he asks me one more question, off the record, without the folder. He asks me what a man does with 460 grams of gold in 3 months, because I do not have a car, or a watch, or a coat that has not been mended. I tell him I buy medicine with it. He looks at me for a long moment over the top of his glasses. Then he says that in 26 years, I am not the worst thing that has sat in that room, and that I might be the strangest, and he lets me out into the rain. I get back to the garage at 10 in the morning. The wall is a wall. Dusk is 7 hours away. I sit on the concrete floor with my back against the bricks for 7 hours, and I do not eat, and I get up twice to be sick in a drain, and I count the last hour out loud, like a lunatic. Then the air goes soft, and I go through, and the ward of the Reeds is waiting for me at the dye works. Not a crowd. 4 people. Fen, Marta, Kassin, and Hesta, who has been sitting in the wet grass in front of that wall since the first mist dawn, 3 days, because somebody had to be there when it opened. Hesta gets up and hits me in the chest with both fists, and then holds onto my coat and will not let go, and Marta has to take her off me. Fen has the book. Of course he has the book. I ask him for the number before anyone has said hello, because we are the kind of people who need the number first. 219, he says. 219 dead in 5 wards in 3 days, and it is worse than that, and he makes himself say the rest of it standing in the wet grass. The storeroom emptied on the 2nd morning. The counters cut the doses in half to stretch it, because they are clever and they were trying to help, and that made everything faster and not slower. 840 people were in the middle of a course when the powder ran out. Of those, 190 are already back on their mats with the fever again, and the second fever is worse than the first. That is what a broken course does. I knew it. I knew it in the first week from a roof mender called Den, and I built a whole machine to stop exactly this happening, and then I went and got myself detained by a man in a cardigan. Kassin catches my arm as I go past him, and he says the only useful thing anybody says to me that night. He says that guilt is a luxury, and I can have some of it later, and that right now there is a storeroom to fill, but I cannot fill it. That is the thing I have to say out loud to 4 people in the dark, and it is the worst sentence I have ever had to say in my life. My money is gone, not spent, taken and locked in an office in another world, and the shop where I turned gold into medicine is now a place I can never walk into again as long as I live. I have gold. I have almost a kilogram of merchant gold sitting in a locked box in Marta's back room, and on the other side of that wall it is worth exactly nothing to me because I have no way left to turn it into money. Marta asks me why I cannot simply sell it. So I explain what a document is and what a hallmark is and what happens to a man with no papers who walks into a proper shop with a handful of gold in his fist. She listens. Then she says the thing that opens the door without knowing that she has. She says that in the reeds, if you cannot sell a thing yourself, you find a man whose name is allowed to sell it, and you pay him for the use of his name. I sit down on a barrel and put my head in my hands, because she has just described, in one sentence, the entire structure of trade in my own world, and because I know exactly whose name I am going to have to use. Vitalik Petrovich Grushin, who runs a small distribution company on the edge of the city, and who chose me for a hole in his count, and made me sign a paper for 600,000 rubles. I go to see him on a Tuesday morning, in the office where I used to bring the picking sheets, past the smoking area where I ate my sandwiches, past a girl at reception who was hired after they fired me and does not know my face. Vitalik has not changed. Gray polo shirt, good watch, a room that smells of coffee and printer. He looks up and he recognizes me, and he smiles like a man whose day has just improved. He asks if I have come to pay. Then he laughs at his own joke and offers me a coffee, and I have to sit there and take a cup from him, because I need something from him, and he is going to make me hold that cup while he decides. I tell him what I want. I want his company to buy veterinary antibiotic premix from his distributors, at wholesale, in pallet quantities, in the company's name, with all the paperwork correct. He asks me what I am going to pay with. And this is where I have to do the thing I have been dreading since Marta said it, which is put a piece of gold on his desk in front of a man who already thinks I am a thief. He picks it up. He turns it over. He is not stupid. And the first thing he says is that this has no hallmark on it. And the second thing he says is my name, slowly, in a voice with a great deal of enjoyment in it. Then he leans back in his chair and gives me the speech. I knew it, he says. I always knew it. Everybody said, Vitalik, you were hard on the boy, and here you are back in my office with unmarked gold in your pocket. I sit there and let him have it. All of it. 4 minutes of a man being right about a thing he is completely wrong about, and I keep my mouth shut because I need his name and because there is a storeroom to fill. When he has finished, I tell him my price. He takes the gold at 1,000 rubles a gram. He knows what it is worth. I know what it is worth. 1,800 is the pawn shop price, and the pawn shop was already stealing from me, and he is going to take nearly half of everything I bring him for the use of a company stamp. I say yes without arguing for 1 second, and that is the thing that finally makes him nervous, because a man who does not haggle is a man who is not thinking about money at all. He asks me what it is for. I tell him it is for medicine for an outbreak. He asks where. I tell him he does not want to know. And for once in his life, he decides that he does not. We do the first order that week. 60 kilograms of doxycycline premix, farm grade, in 8 sealed drums, delivered on a pallet to a lockup he rents in the same row as my garage. The invoice is beautiful, clean, legal, stamped, boring, with a tax number and a signature and a line for the cargo. 60 kilograms of medicine for imaginary cows, moving through the country in daylight, on paper, because a man with a company stamp asked for it. It cost me 290 grams of merchant gold and a great deal of my pride. It holds enough doses to treat 22,000 people. I have to move it through the wall, 4 buckets at a time, twice a day, and that is fine. That is arithmetic. Arithmetic and a sore back are the 2 problems in my life I actually know how to solve. What I cannot solve is what has happened in the reeds while I was on a bench in a police station. Vane has been down the hill. Not himself. He does not do things himself. But his men have been in the wards every day for 3 days with the death books, and they have been counting and they have been talking. And the story they tell is not a lie, which is what makes it so good. The foreign powder is a false cure, they say. It puts the fever down for a few days, and then the fever comes back stronger, and the man who sells it disappears when it does. 190 people relapsed. Their neighbors watched it happen. Every one of those houses is a witness for him now, and there is nothing I can say to them that is not technically an excuse. On the fourth day after I come back, somebody puts a stone through the window of the packing house. On the fifth, one of the counters, a widow called Anna with 3 children, is knocked down in the street and her basket emptied into the mud. Hesta wants to go and find the men who did it. I tell her no. Then I do the only thing I have ever known how to do with an angry room, which is to open the book and start counting in public. We do it in the square by the fish market. Cassin, Fen, Marta, and me, with a plank on 2 barrels and the second book open, and Fen reading names. Not the dead, the living. 200 names of people from that quarter who are standing up and breathing on the day of that count, who would be under the ground by the ordinary arithmetic of this plague. Then we read the 190, every name of every person who relapsed while I was gone, out loud, and I stand there in front of their families, and I tell them the truth, which is that I ran out and that it was my fault. I do not blame the guild for it. I do not blame the crown or the weather or anybody in a black gown. I say the words "it was my fault" out loud, in a square, in front of 400 people. Then I tell them what a course is one more time. All 14. Every one of them, even when you feel well, especially when you feel well. And I make a promise that I do not entirely know how to keep, which is that the powder will not run out again while I am alive. Marta tells me afterwards that it was a stupid thing to promise. Cassin tells me it was the only thing worth promising. Both of them are right, and I go and start filling the storeroom, and for 9 days it holds. Then on the 10th morning, Nessa comes down the hill on her own, and she does it in a way that tells me the palace has stopped working. She comes in a laundry cart with her hair under a cloth, copying the trick she watched her sister use, with one terrified guard and no permission from anybody at all. She is 8 years old. She has crossed half a city on her own initiative, and she stands in Marta's front room in a servant's cloak among 40 women folding papers, and she looks around until she finds me. Then she tells me that her sister has been sleeping in the day, and that she got angry about the window being open, and that she has not eaten anything since the day before yesterday, and that this morning, when Nessa hugged her, Ilyena made a sound like it hurt, and would not let go of her own left arm. I go up that hill faster than the horse wants to go, with an 8-year-old holding onto my coat behind me and a guard swearing along in the rear. Ilyena is at the council table when I come in, sitting straight with a pen in her hand, arguing about the northern grain road with 4 lords, and her face is the color of the paper in front of her. I do not say anything clever. I walk the length of the room, put 2 fingers under her jaw, and everyone in that council starts shouting at once. The swelling under her arm is the size of a hen's egg, and it has already gone soft at the top. She has been carrying it for 4 days and sitting at a council table with it. She stands up, tells the council that the session is closed, and walks out of that room on her own legs. She gets 3 corridors before her knees go, and I catch her, and she is burning through her sleeves. In her own room with the door shut, she tells me why. She says it flat, the way I taught her, because she has learned that the flat voice is the one people believe. If the regent is known to be sick, the council takes the seal. The law says the seal passes when the regent cannot sit, and Renard has been counting the days she has not sat since her father died. She had 4 days of the seal left to sign the almoner's charter into the permanent law. 4 days. So she wore long sleeves, and she sat at that table, and she made her sister swear not to tell anyone. Nessa has been carrying this for 2 days, and is now sitting in the corner of the room shaking, so I put her in Marta's hands and send them both out, because there is going to be nothing in the next hour that a child should watch. I get Cassin. He comes up the hill in the back of a laundry cart with his bag on his knees, an old man struck off by his guild, and the guards on the private stair let him through because Brack tells them to. Kassan looks at her for 4 minutes. Then he takes me out into the anteroom and closes the door and tells me the truth, which is what I have kept him for. The powder will not be enough on its own. She is 4 days in with the swelling gone soft and blood in the cough and a heartbeat like a bird, and by mouth, in a stomach that throws everything back, the doxa will not get there fast enough. Then he asks me the question he has clearly been building to since he walked in, which is whether the place I come from has anything stronger than the powder. And I stand in a stone anteroom in the Palace of Merith and I see, very clearly, a shelf. Not aisle 4. The cold shelf at the end, the boxes with the glass in them, the ones you carry in a plastic tray with both hands. Yes, I tell him, we have something stronger. It goes in with a needle, and it goes into the blood, and it works in hours. He asks me what it costs. I tell him a vial costs about the same as a loaf of bread. Kassan, who has been a physician for 40 years and has watched a queen's father die of this, has to put a hand on the wall. Then he asks the question that actually matters, which is who is going to put a needle into the regent of Merith, and I have no answer for him at all. It is 9:15 at night in Moscow when I come through the wall, and it is raining, and I have 9 hours before the door opens again. Dusk was my last opening for 9 hours. I have until the morning, and I have no card, no bank, no pawnshop, and 9,000 rubles in cash in a tin under the camp bed that I have been keeping for the electricity. I get to Lyudmila Petrovna's shop 9 minutes before she closes. She sees me through the glass and shakes her head before I have got the door open. She tells me she meant it. She cannot sell me antibiotics by the crate, she has a license, and she has a daughter in Tver, and she is 63 years old. I tell her I am not here for the crate. I need 8 vials of ceftriaxone, sterile water, syringes, and 40 minutes of her time. She stops. She asks me who it is for. I do not lie to that woman, because she gave me tea once when a truck broke down, and because she is the only person in this entire city who has ever helped me for nothing. I tell her it is for a woman of 22 who has been hiding a swelling under her arm for 4 days while she signed papers, that there is no doctor within reach of her who is not a fraud, and that if I go back with nothing, she is dead by Thursday. Lyudmila Petrovna looks at me for a long moment over her glasses. Then she locks the front door, turns the sign round, and goes to the fridge. 8 vials, 32 rubles a vial, a pack of 10 syringes for 110, ampules of water, alcohol wipes, a box of gloves, and a roll of surgical tape that she puts in without charging me for it. 406 rubles in total. I stand at that counter with 406 rubles of life in a paper bag, and I have to hold on to the edge of the counter for a second. Then she takes an orange out of her own lunch bag and puts it on the counter, and tells me to roll up my sleeve, because I am going to learn how to do this properly, or I am not leaving her shop. She shows me how to draw the water into the syringe, how to get the air out, how to find the muscle in the upper outer part of the backside, which she demonstrates on herself through her cardigan with a fierce lack of embarrassment. I do it on the orange 9 times. The 9th time she says it is good enough, which from her means it is barely acceptable, and then she writes the dose on the box in marker pen in enormous letters and makes me read it back to her twice. At the door she holds my sleeve the same way she did the first night. Twice a day, she says. 8 vials is 4 days. If it works, you will know in 1, and if you stop when it works, you will kill her. I promise her. I have got a great deal better at promises since the first one I made in that shop, and she can hear it in my voice, and she lets go of my sleeve. I sit in the garage for 6 hours with a paper bag on my knees, and I do not sleep. At dawn, I go through with the bag held against my chest like a man carrying an egg across a field. Kassan draws it up because his hands are steadier than mine, and then he holds out the syringe to me, and I ask him why, and he tells me that a man should do his own work. I have never put a needle into a human being in my life. I put one into the regent of Merith in a cold room at sunrise with her little sister holding her hand and an archmage standing in the doorway, and my hands are shaking so badly that Kassan has to steady my wrist with 2 fingers. Then it is the waiting again. It is always the waiting. 12 hours and Nessa will not leave, and Marta brings food that nobody eats. Sometime in the middle of the second night, when everyone else has fallen asleep on the floor and the fire is down to nothing, I tell her the truth. I do not plan to. I have been holding it alone for 3 months and it is far too heavy, and there is something about a person who cannot hear you that makes a man honest. I tell her about the garage, and about a brick wall that opens at dawn and at dusk for the count of 60, and about a city of 12 million people who have never heard of merit. I tell her that the thing that killed her father is treated there by a nurse in a village clinic on a Tuesday afternoon for about the price of a chicken, and that nobody in that room would even remember it by Friday. I tell her I came here to rob her kingdom. I tell her about the candle holder and the coins off the dead man, and the 460 grams sitting in an evidence locker with a case number on it. I tell her about Toma. I tell her about being 4 hours late, and that I have never once managed to say that out loud to anybody with their eyes open. Then I put my head down on the edge of her bed and I sleep for 2 hours. It is the first sleep I have had in 3 days. Her fever breaks at some point before dawn. Kassan wakes me by kicking the sole of my boot, and he is grinning like a boy, and the woman in the bed is soaked through and breathing like a person. She opens her eyes in the middle of the morning. She looks at the ceiling, then at her sister asleep across her legs, then at me, sitting on the floor with my back against the bedpost. The first thing the regent of Mareth says after 4 days of plague is that if I have let Renard take the seal while she was asleep, she will have me hanged after all. She is on her feet in 3 days, which is far too early. She signs the almoner's charter into the permanent law on the 4th day, sitting up in bed, and holds a council session in her own room on the 5th, with the pen in a hand that shakes. Renard comes to that session with a face like a closed purse. He has spent 5 days believing the seal was coming to him, and he has to sit there and watch a girl of 22 sign her name over and over. She never once tells me whether she heard what I said in the dark, and she does not raise it that week or for a long time after. She simply stops asking me where I come from and starts asking me what I need instead. And what I need by then is an answer to the thing that has been quietly ruining me for a month. The doxa works. That is not in question anymore. In 5 wards, we are curing people faster than we ever have, and Fenn's second book has 20,000 names in it, and the carts have gone from 31 a day to 9 to 6. And yet every morning there are new cases, not relapses. New, fresh first fevers in houses that have never had a mark on the post. In wards we have been walking for 2 months. 6 a day, then 9, then 6 again. The line never comes down to nothing, and I cannot make it come down to nothing, and it is like bailing a boat with a good bucket and a hole under the water. I sit with Fenn one night with 2 candles, and I ask him the question I should have asked in the first month, not how many died, where. He tells me he can do better than where. He can tell me the first house. He has been marking every ladder in that ward since the 2nd week, and a clerk who marks a ladder can tell you which post in a street got its chalk first. We start on the floor of the packing house after the women have gone home. Fenn reads out streets and houses. Marta and I put a bean on the floorboards for every first case in a house, in the position where the house stands, and Hesta holds the candle and complains. It takes us 4 hours and 206 beans, and when we stand up and look down at what we have made, none of us says anything for about a minute. It is not a spread. A sickness that moves from person to person should spread like water on a table, along the lanes where people talk and drink and lie next to each other. That is not what is on the floor. What is on the floor is a ring, thick in the middle, thinner going out, and the middle of it is not in the reeds at all. The middle of it is up the slope, in the granary quarter, in the 4 long warehouses on Mill Row that hold the grain of the northern road. I make Fenn do the other wards. He works for 2 days, and every ward he does adds beans, and every ward makes the same shape, and every ring has its thick edge pointed at the same 4 buildings. The plague has a first house in this city, and it is not a house. I go up to Mill Row at night with Hesta, because Hesta grew up on that slope and knows which yard dog is deaf. We go over the wall of the third warehouse at the back, where the loading doors are chained from the outside. Inside, the smell hits me before my eyes adjust. Warm grain and ammonia and something sweet and rotten underneath it. The sacks go up 30 feet in the dark. They are stacked 20 deep, and they have been there long enough that the bottom rows have gone soft and split and are sprouting in the damp. Hesta puts a hand on my arm and tells me to stand still. So I stand still, and I listen. And the sound in the roof and the walls and under my boots is the sound of a floor that is moving. I put my lamp down on a sack and hold it low, and there are rats in that light in numbers I do not have a word for. Not a dozen, not 100. A carpet of them, going away from the lamp in a wave. And on the sack under my hand, in the light, there are small dark specks jumping. On the sacking, on my sleeve, on the back of my wrist. I get out over the wall so fast that I take skin off both palms, and I stand in the alley beating my own coat with my hands like a madman while Hesta watches me this whole time. 2 months of powders and ladders and counters and a storeroom and a woman with a needle and an orange. 2 months of catching a river in a cup. 300 paces down the slope from a building nobody has opened since last autumn. Fen asked me about the vermin in the second week. I stood in the lane with a tin box under my arm, and I told him no, and I gave him a reason, and I was pleased with my reason. He wrote it down in his good hand, the way he writes everything I say. Hesta asks me what is in there. I tell her the grain of the northern road, held back since the harvest by a man who wanted 7 coppers a loaf instead of 2, and every rat in the kingdom of Merith living in it, breeding in it, and carrying the plague out of those doors on their backs every night, into a city that has been burying its children for 6 months. She asks me whose warehouses they are. I already know. The name is painted on the boards over the loading doors on Mill Row, and it has been up there in the open the whole time, where anybody could read it. Haldervane, grain factor of the Northern Road, cousin and creditor to the Grand Physician of the Chartered Guild of Physic. We walk back down the slope in the dark, and neither of us talks. At the bottom of Mill Row, where it turns into the middle city, there is a man standing under the lamp at the corner in a gray coat. He does not run when he sees us. He does not hide. He looks at me for a moment, and then he nods politely, the way you nod at a man you have been introduced to, and he walks away up the hill. I lay it out for the council 2 days later with Fenn's book, and with 206 beans in a jar because I cannot carry a floor up a hill. Chalk on the table. Every ward, every first case, every ring pointing at the same 4 buildings on Mill Row, and Fenn reading the dates out in his thin, careful, unanswerable voice. Severin backs it. Cassin backs it. Brack says that his own men have been complaining about the rats on that slope since before the spring, and that he had them counted as a nuisance. And Renard, Lord Chancellor of Mareth, listens to the whole thing and then tells me why we are not going to touch it. The Crown has been negotiating for that grain since the summer. 4 warehouses, enough to feed Dunhale from the turn of the year until the spring, in a season where the northern road has stopped moving because carters do not drive into plague cities. Halder Vane wants 9 coppers a loaf equivalent for the lot. The council has been arguing him down for 2 months, and I have just walked into that room and told them that the only food the city has for the winter is a nest. Burn it, and 20,000 people who did not die of plague get to find out what a hungry January is like. Do not burn it, and the rings on my floor keep growing, and I keep bailing a boat with a hole under the water. Elena does not flinch at it. She says one sentence, and it is the sentence that makes me quietly certain for the first time that this kingdom is going to be all right. Grain can be bought, she says, children cannot. Then she orders a crown inspection of the Mill Row warehouses, sealed by the guard, with the almoner and the circle present, at first light in 3 days. We never get to that morning. Vane moves the night before it, with 9 men and a piece of paper, and not one of them has to raise a hand to me. I come through the wall at dawn with 2 tubs under my arms, and the third in a rucksack, and there are 9 men of the guild watch standing in the wet grass in front of the old dye works, in a half circle, waiting. They have been there since the middle of the night. They have torches and a warrant and a temple witness, and standing at the end of the line in a gray coat, with his hands folded, is the steward I have seen on that corner twice. His name is Pell. He is a small, quiet man with a good memory and no violence in him at all, and he stands there in the wet grass and testifies on the spot out loud to 9 witnesses that he has now watched the foreigner step out of empty air 3 times. They do not hit me. They are very careful with me, which frightens me more, because careful means somebody expensive gave the order. The charge is read at the fish market jail an hour later. Sorcery within the walls, unlicensed physic causing death, and the introduction of pestilence into the realm of Marith by a person of no house and no origin. They take the tubs, they take my coat, they put me in a stone room with a grate for a window and a bucket, and I sit down on a bench and start counting the openings I am going to miss, because that is apparently what I do now. Here is what saves the city while I am in that room, and it is the best thing I have ever built, and I did not know it was finished until it had to run without me. The machine keeps going. All of it. Cassin walks the lines at dawn. Marta runs 2 shifts in the packing house. Hesta takes the storeroom key and does the picking off the racks. Oldest tub first, exactly the way I taught her, and swears at anyone who touches the new end. 4 struck-off physicians walk the wards. 140 counters stand in doorways twice a day and watch people swallow. Fen keeps the book, street by street, and does not miss a single morning. 16,000 people go on taking their medicine for 3 days without me, and the number in the second book goes up on every one of those days, and I find all of it out later, sitting on a bench, from a clerk who is breaking a rule to tell me. That is the whole point of the thing we built, and I find it out sitting on a bench in a police station. A miracle needs me in the room. A woman with a basket and a list of houses does not need me at all. The trial is on the 4th day in the Great Hall, and half of Dunhale is standing in the yard outside it. Renard presides, because the regent has been accused of shielding me and cannot sit in judgment. Ilyena is on the bench at the side with her hands flat on her knees and her face absolutely still. Orville Vane prosecutes for the guild. He has had 3 days to build it, and he has not wasted an hour of them. He starts with the wonder because a wonder makes a crowd afraid. 9 witnesses of the guild watch, a temple man and his own steward, all swearing that this man comes out of thin air at dawn and goes into it at dusk. He does not call me a demon. He is much better than that. He says he does not know what I am, and that not knowing is exactly the point, and he lets 400 people fill in the blank for themselves. Then he does the relapses, and this part actually hurts, because it is true. 190 people who took the foreign powder, got better, and then went down again worse. He has the names. He got them from the wards. He reads 12 of them out slowly, and then, when he has the room exactly where he wants it, he sends a clerk out to the corridor and brings in a map. It is a good map. It is on parchment, drawn properly by a guild draftsman, and it has the rings on it, and it has my beans on it, and it has been copied from Brother Fenn's book by a small, quiet man in a gray coat who has been following a clerk around for a month. Vane holds it up and says that the sickness in this city moves in rings, and that the rings began in the spring in the north of the city, and that if the court will trace the path of them, the rings follow the path of a foreigner who arrived in the spring with a bag. The hall makes a sound I have never heard a hall make. I have been at the bottom of a few bad rooms in my life. That one is worse than the guild session by a distance. Renard lets all of that settle for a while. Then he asks me what I have to say to the charge of sorcery, and 400 people lean forward to hear it. And I say the only thing I have, which is the truth, in the flattest voice I own. I tell them there is a hole in the world. It is in a broken brick wall behind the old dye works, and it opens at dawn and at dusk, and it stays open for the count of 60, and it carries whatever a man has on his body. I tell them I did not make it, that I do not own it, that I have no idea in this world or the other why it is there, and that it opened for a man who was drunk and looking for a fuse box, which is not the way anybody's holy books tell it. I tell them I found it by accident, and that I used it to steal from them for 6 weeks before I ever used it to bring anything back. I say that out loud in front of 400 people and a princess, a candle holder from the shrine on Coper Lane, coins off a dead man, a chain from a house where everyone was already gone. Then Severin rises without being called, which an archmage of the high circle is permitted to do exactly once in a reign, and he tells the court what the circle has found at the dye works. 9 of them have stood in front of that wall for 2 nights. There is no working on it. No sign, no binding, no blood, nothing that any mage in Marith can read. It is a fact of the world, he says. Like a hot spring, or a cave that breathes, or the pull that turns a needle north. It was there before this man, and it will be there after him, and calling it sorcery is the same as calling the tide a crime. That buys back the attention of the room. It does not buy the room itself, and standing where I am standing, I can feel the difference between the two. So I ask the court for the guild's own death book of the spring, and I ask for Brother Fen. Vane objects. Renard allows it, and I watch the grand physician of the Chartered Guild of Physic sit down very slowly, because he has finally worked out what I have been doing with a clerk and a piece of chalk for 2 months. Fen reads the first 41 names of the plague, the first 41 in the whole city, from the guild's own record, with the dates in order at the very start of the spring. Every one of those first 41 people lived within 4 streets of Mill Row. Fen reads the address after every name, in order, and nobody in that hall interrupts him once. Then he reads the ward book of the reeds, and the date on which a foreigner with no name was first written down in it as a hauler of carts for bread. 19 days later, 19 days after the 40th person on Mill Row was already in the ground, and by then the rings were already 3 streets wide, and I was at that point still in another world with a scanner in my hand, wondering how to pay my rent. The hall goes quiet in a completely different way than it went an hour ago, and somewhere near the front, a lord says the word warehouses out loud without meaning to. I let Fen close the book. Then I ask Renard for one more thing, and I ask him in front of everybody, because I want 400 witnesses for what comes out of it. I ask the court for leave to open a sack in front of it. Renard, who has been a lawyer for 30 years, asks me what is in the sack, and I tell him I would rather show him than tell him. Brack brings it in on a handcart with 2 of his men, and the sack has been under crown seal since dusk yesterday, taken from the 3rd warehouse on Mill Row by the guard, in the presence of a temple witness, and its own stamp is still on the sacking. Halder Vane, grain factor of the Northern Road, painted on in the same letters that are on the boards over the loading doors. Casson cuts it open on the floor of the great hall of Marith and steps back, and what comes out of that sack ends the trial. There are 2 dead rats in the grain. There are things moving in the sacking that anybody in the front rows can see for themselves. And when the grain spills, it spills black with fleas across the stone floor, and people start climbing over the benches to get away from it. It takes the guards a while to get the hall back. A lord of the council is standing on a bench. Somebody is being sick behind the pillars. And Halder Vane, who has been sitting in the 2nd row in a very good coat, is on his feet shouting that this is an outrage, and that his grain has been sealed and untouched since the harvest. He says it twice, at the top of his voice, before he hears the shape of what he is saying, and then he stops, with his mouth still open. Sealed since the harvest. 4 warehouses of the Northern Road's grain, sealed since last autumn, while bread in the city went from 2 coppers to 7, and the council argued with him for 2 months about his price. Renard sits back in his chair and looks at that man the way a man looks at a stain he has just realized is on his own sleeve. And then I do the last piece, because after 2 months I finally have all of it in one room. I tell them about the fleas. I tell them what lives on a rat, and what a flea does when the rat dies, and how it goes looking for the next warm thing, which is a carter loading a sack, or a boy sent to buy grain, or a woman sweeping out a store. I tell them this is why the sickness has never once behaved the way a sickness should, why whole streets go down in the same week, why the wards nearest the mills always went first, and why my powder has been curing people faster than this city could get sick, and has still never once emptied a ward of it. You cannot cure a city that is being bitten every night, I tell them. You can only keep pace with it, and I have been keeping pace with it since the summer, and I am tired. Then Orville Vane gets to his feet to answer me, and the whole hall turns to him the way a hall turns to the man who always has an answer ready, and nothing comes out of him at all, not gracefully. He goes down against the end of the guild bench with his arm out and takes a stack of papers with him, and the sound in that hall is the sound of 400 people standing up at once. I get there before his own men do. He is burning. I can feel it through the sleeve of the gown, and when I take his wrist and push the black silk back off his arm, there it is, under his arm, the size of a hen's egg. He has been on Mill Row. Of course he has, 4 times in the last month, going over his cousin's investment, walking between the stacks with his good boots on, in and out of the doors of the thing that has been feeding him for a year. He knows what it is. He has known what it is since it started, and there is nothing in the eyes looking up at me except a very great deal of fear. I put my hand out behind me without looking round and ask Marta for the bag, and she has already got it in my palm before I have finished asking. And then I do the thing I have been imagining in one form or another, since I stood in a house with no floor and looked at a bottle of chalk water beside a dying boy's head. I kneel down next to the Grand Physician of the Chartered Guild of Physic on the floor of the Great Hall in front of the entire city, and I hold up a folded square of waxed paper so that the back rows can see it. This costs less than 2 eggs at the river market, I tell them. It has always cost less than 2 eggs. It cost less than 2 eggs on the day this man sold Nella of the Reeds a bottle of water and chalk for 11 silver, and her son died 4 days later. Then I tell them the other number, because Fen has it, and because it deserves to be said in that room. 19,000 silver. That is what the guild has taken from the wards of this city for the pale water since the spring. Then I unfold the paper of powder, and I hold it out to him, down there on the stone with his collar undone and his own guild watching. It is free, I tell him. It has always been free in the Reeds. You will take 1 at dawn and 1 at dusk for 7 days, all 14, and you will not stop when you feel better, because that is how men die twice. He looks at the powder, then at me, then at 400 people, and at his own guild bench, and at a princess sitting very still with her hands on her knees. And Orville Vane, who called it poison in front of the crown, asks a laundrywoman for a cup of water in a voice that everybody in that hall can hear. He swallows it. Hesta, standing over him with the basket on her arm, waits until she has actually seen the swallow, exactly as trained, and then she takes her chalk out of her apron. She crosses the first half rung of the ladder on the front of his own gown, in white, right across the gilt silver at the collar, and walks away. Nobody laughs. It is much too big for laughing. But that story goes out of the doors of that hall and across Dunhale before the sun has moved a hand's width. And by evening there are children in the Reeds, crossing rungs on each other's sleeves with river chalk. The court finds for me in about 9 minutes. The charge of sorcery is struck. The unlicensed physic falls with it, because the Crown Almoner's charter was signed into permanent law by a woman sitting up in bed with a shaking hand. Halder Vane is taken from the hall by Brack's men that afternoon, not for the plague. There is no law in the 3rd book about breeding a plague in a warehouse, because nobody had ever thought of it. They take him for the horde, for holding the grain of the northern road out of a starving city to move a price, which is an old crime with an old penalty, and the council has been building that file since the summer without ever knowing what else was in his sacks. And then, 4 days later, the regent of Merith burns 4 warehouses of her own city's winter bread. She does it herself, in person, on the 4th morning, with the whole slope roped off and the circle standing in a ring around it, and half the city watching from the roofs. It takes 2 days to burn. The smoke goes up brown and then black and then a filthy yellow that hangs over Dunhale for a week, and the smell of it is the worst thing I have ever breathed. Before the fire, they put down 2,000 traps, and the circle does something to the ground under the buildings that I do not understand and do not want to. And Severin tells me afterwards that he has never in his life used his art for anything he was prouder of. The bread price goes to 12 coppers within 4 days. Then Cobble the spice merchant, who paid me 31 grams of gold in the second week for a wife who is currently downstairs shouting at a servant, calls the merchant quarter together in his own hall. 41 houses, every one of them with somebody in it who is alive because of a paper of powder they did not have to beg for. They put up the money for the winter grain out of their own stores, at the price the crown was arguing about, and they buy it in from the south and the east, and they do it in 3 weeks. Cobble tells me it is a business decision and that a dead city is a bad market, and he is lying through his teeth and we both know it, and I let him have it. The week after the fire, Fen brings me the new count of first cases in every ward of the city. 9 on the day of the fire, 6 on the day after that. Then 4 again, then 1, and Fen reads every number out to me twice, like a man who does not trust his own hand. And then, on a Tuesday in the middle of the month, for the first time since the spring, a day in the city of Dunhale on which nobody at all falls sick. Fen closes the first book on a wet morning at the end of the month, in the yard behind the temple, with about 60 people standing round in the mud because word got out that he was going to do it. 31,406 names. That is what the plague took out of the city of Dunhale between the first week of spring and the day we burned Mill Row. He reads the last one out. A carter's wife from the ward of 9 Bridges, 44 years old, who fell sick 2 days before the fire and was too far gone by the time a counter reached her. Then he shuts it and ties it and gives it to the temple to keep, and he does not make a speech because Fen has never made a speech in his life. The second book has 26,041 names in it, and it stays open because we are still writing in it, and because that is now the only book in this kingdom that anybody bothers to read. Here is the thing that keeps me awake in the weeks after, and it has nothing to do with rats or guilds or men in black gowns. I am one man with a bad back and a hole in a wall, and there is nobody else in either world who can do this if I stop. Every one of those 26,000 people is alive because a man in a garage in another city got to the market before the shop shut. If I am ill for a week, this kingdom has nothing at all. If I fall off a horse, if Sokolov opens his file again, if the wall stops opening one morning for reasons nobody in either world understands, because nobody in either world understands why it opens now. So I spend the whole winter building the thing that will outlive me. It is dull work, every day of it, and it is the work I am proudest of in either world. The first piece is the store. We build it properly, in stone, on the dry ground behind the almoner's house, with a roof that does not leak, and a floor a foot above the ground, and metal sheet nailed over every corner a rat could bite. Racks along both walls, every drum numbered on the lid, oldest at the picking end. A board on the wall with a column for every ward and a running total, and Hesta as store mistress with the only key on a string round her neck. She takes to it the way a duchess takes to a title. Within a month, there is a written rule about who may touch the racks, and it is enforced by a woman of 60 with a basket and no fear of anybody alive. The second piece is the stock. I set the number myself, and I make Ilyena sign it into the law of the store, so that no clerk in a future council can argue it down. 1 full year of the city's medicine, on the racks at all times. Not 1 month, not until the spring. A year, counted in courses, checked every quarter, and if it goes below that, the crown buys more before it buys anything else at all. It takes me until midwinter to fill it, and it takes 2 kilograms of merchant gold, and the merchant quarter pays for most of that without being asked twice. The third piece is the paperwork, and the paperwork has a name, and the name is Vitalik Petrovich Grushin. I go to him in the second week of the winter with a proposal typed out by a girl in a print shop for 200 rubles, because a man like Vitalik does not read anything that is handwritten. A standing quarterly order, veterinary premix, farm grade, in sealed drums delivered to the lockup, paid in gold at 1,000 a gram, which is robbery, and I have decided to keep being robbed on purpose. He asks me again what it is for, and this time, because we are going to be doing this for years, and because a lie that has to last years is too much work, I tell him. I tell him about the wall and the kingdom and the plague, all of it, flat, in his office with the coffee going cold. He listens to the whole thing without interrupting, which is the first respectful thing he has ever done in my presence. Then he tells me I am insane, and that he does not care, and that the order will be ready on the 15th of every quarter. That is the correct answer, and I am not even disappointed. A friend can change his mind. A supplier who is making 400,000 rubles a quarter off you does not change anything, ever, and will fight to keep you alive out of pure self-interest. On the day I pay off the 600,000, I do it in cash, in his office, in bricks of 5,000 out of a plastic bag, because I want to watch it land. He counts it. He signs the paper and gives it to me. And then, when I am at the door, he says the thing I have been waiting 2 years to hear, and he says it to the desk instead of to me. He says he always knew it was not me who took the pallet. He says it was easier to make a picker sign a paper than to make a scene about a man in the transport office who plays cards with his brother-in-law. I stand in that doorway with the paper in my hand, and I wait for the thing I have been promising myself since the day they walked me out. The hot rush, the shouting, the satisfaction. It does not come. What comes instead is a very tired kind of arithmetic. Shouting at him costs me a supplier and buys me nothing that I can put on a rack. So I fold the paper into my pocket, and I tell him the 15th of the quarter, and I go out through the smoking area where I used to eat my sandwiches, and I let it go. Sokolov closes the case in the spring. He telephones me, and then he comes to the garage himself with a plastic folder, which I do not think is standard practice. He tells me the Northern Road burglaries were cleared in the winter by 2 brothers from Lipetsk who had nothing to do with anybody's grandmother. My gold is released. 460 grams in a bag with a sticker on it. He gives it back on the concrete floor of a rented garage. Then he looks around the garage, at the camp bed and the tin of tea and the racks of empty drums, and he asks me the question one more time, off the record, with the folder shut. So I tell him, a hole in a wall, a kingdom with a plague, 40,000 people, 11 wards, and a bucket of veterinary powder that costs less than his lunch. Sokolov listens. He nods slowly. Then he says that in 26 years he has heard better lies, and he has never once heard a worse one, and that whatever it actually is, I should buy myself a coat, because I look like a corpse. I buy a coat. It costs 6,000 rubles. It is the first thing I have bought for myself since the boy on the straw, and I feel guilty about it for a week, and Marta tells me I look like a fishmonger who has come into money. Lyudmila Petrovna gets a share in the story that she never asked for and could not use. I try to pay her back for the vials, and she will not take money from me, so I bring her a bottle of the good wine the temple witness liked, which she does take. She asks me every single time whether the woman lived. Every time for years. And every time I tell her yes. And every time she nods once and goes back to the crossword and does not ask me anything else at all. The kingdom of Mareth gets its own knowledge that winter, and none of it comes through the wall in a bucket. Kassan takes 8 students, and he teaches them what he learned in 40 years and what he learned in 6 months. And the second list is shorter and heavier. Wash, boil, count. Do not open a vein because a book told you to. Severin gets 3 more microscopes out of me on the next quarter's order, and the proudest men in the kingdom spend the winter scraping water and blood and their own hands onto little squares of glass. They condemn 9 wells and put a copper a tail on rats, and they come out of that winter as the world's first magical sanitation authority, and they are insufferable about it, and they have earned it. The granaries of the Northern Road get rebuilt with stone floors, metal sheet to the height of a man, and a crown inspector who can open any sack in any warehouse in Mareth without asking anybody. That law has Fenn's name on it. A death clerk of the ward of the Reeds wrote the food law of a kingdom, and the council passed it in an afternoon because nobody wanted to be the man who argued with Fenn about counting. The man who hit me in the mouth in the rain on the first morning carries a basket in the streets above the fish market now. His father is in the first book. He has never mentioned the punch, and neither have I, and twice a day he stands in a doorway and watches somebody swallow. Nella works as a counter now. She has the reeds, the lanes below the shrine, the streets she has lived in her whole life, including the one where her son died in the night while I was standing at a shop counter being told about prescriptions. She never says it to me again, not once, in all the time after, and that is much harder to carry than if she had said it every day. I asked Marta about it once. She tells me that Nella keeps a bundle of 14 papers in a tin on the shelf where the bottle of pale water used to stand, and that she has never used it, and that she will not let anybody move it. Then Marta tells me to eat my soup, and that is the end of the discussion, and it is Nella's soup, because she cooks for the packing house on Thursdays now. She has never once said that she forgives me. She cooks on Thursdays, and she puts the bowl down in front of me, and she goes back to her lane with her basket, and I eat it every time. Bina is 7 now. She has decided that she is going to be a counter when she is bigger, and Hesta has already promised her a basket, and Marta has told them both that they are ridiculous. Nessa is 9 and has read the whole of the 3rd book of the law on purpose for fun, and has begun correcting the council on points of procedure. Renard has aged 4 years in 1 winter. Brack's daughter took her 14 doses in the middle city while the carpenters were still taking the frame down in the palace yard. She is well. She works in the kitchens up the hill now, and her father still cannot thank me without looking at the floor. Cassin dies 2 years later in his bed, 63 years old, with the Crown Almoner's seal on the wall in the frame where his charter used to hang. Half the city comes out for it. Vane lives. He takes all 14 doses, watched twice a day by a widow with a piece of chalk, and he gets up off that floor, and he does not die of the gray rot. They do not hang him, and they do not send him away. He becomes nothing, in the way he made Cassin nothing for 9 years, and he has to walk through a city where everybody knows what a paper of powder costs and what he charged for a bottle of water. I see him once, about a year afterwards, on the far side of the fish market, standing at a stall, counting coins into his hand. He sees me too. Neither of us does anything at all about it. And then there is Ilyena, who I have left until the end, and who would tell you herself that this is exactly like me. She takes the crown properly in the summer, because a regent who has burned 4 warehouses of grain and been proved right about it does not get to stay a regent for long. The first thing she does with it is create an office that nobody in the history of Mareth has ever held, and she gives it to a foreigner with no house, in front of a court that watched him kneel on that same floor to give medicine to the man who tried to hang him. Master of the Crown Store. It is a job, with a salary, a key, a ledger, and a rack of drums, and the word saint appears nowhere on the paper. I take it with both hands. They still call me Tem in the reeds. I have given up fighting it. Fen writes doxa in the book in the spelling an 8-year-old invented with bread in her hand, and the whole kingdom has followed her. Ilyena tells me, on the night of that summer, that she heard everything I said in the dark when she was dying. All of it. The garage, the wall, the candle holder off the shrine, the boy who was 4 hours late. She has known since the 4th day, and she has never once used it, in a year of council sessions where using it would have been the easiest thing in the world. I ask her why she never said. She tells me that a person tells the truth when they are certain they will not be answered, and that answering it would have been a kind of theft. Then she says the thing that I keep. Out of everything anybody says to me in either world, and she says it in the plainest voice she has. She tells me that she does not need a saint. Saints turn up in the 3rd week of a plague and are gone by the 4th, and a kingdom cannot be run off a miracle, and she has buried a father who was told he was blessed right up until the day he stopped breathing. What she needs is a man who counts, and comes back at dawn, and comes back again at dusk, and does that every day for years. There is nothing glamorous in it anywhere, and she knows exactly what she is asking me for. I tell her I am not going anywhere. She tells me she knows, and then she asks me, with the entire court of Mareth on the other side of a wall pretending not to listen, whether I would consider spending the hours between the 2 openings somewhere other than the storeroom. I say yes. It takes me an embarrassing length of time to say it, and Nessa, who is listening from behind a door, tells the whole palace before breakfast. Some of what 2 people build belongs only to the 2 of them. It has been growing for a year now at the speed of a pair who are both extremely bad at stopping work in the evening. On the last evening of that summer, I am in the store with Hesta, checking the racks against the board before the dusk opening, because a year of stock does not count itself. 4 drums to carry through tonight, 2 under the arms, 1 on the back, 1 in the hand, and Hesta tells me for the 200th time that I am going to ruin my spine and that she has told me so. Bina is waiting for me at the dye works, sitting on the wall in the weeds with her heels banging against the stone, the way she has done nearly every dusk since the winter. She is 7 years old, and she has a job now, and the job is her own idea, and nobody in the kingdom of Marith has ever been paid for it. She counts me through. When the air in front of the bricks goes soft, she starts, out loud, in her flat little voice, all the way to 60, and she does not lose her place, and she does not rush it, and she is still going when I step through. She could only get to 20 when I met her. She told me it got boring after that, and I told her she was right, and then she went and learned the rest of it anyway, so that a man carrying buckets would have somebody counting on the other side of the wall. Ilyina will be at the dye works at dawn. She usually is, 2 mornings in 3, with her hair under a cloth, and a guard who is still doing an appalling job of dressing as a carter. And I will come out of that wall at first light with 4 drums of the cheapest medicine in my world, worth an entire kingdom in this one, and Bina will be counting, and Fen will have the book open with the running total already ruled. 26,000 names in the book of the living, 31,000 in the book that is tied shut in a temple, and my own hand in both of them, and no way in either world to make those 2 numbers into one clean thing. I do not think about it much anymore. The carts leave at dawn, the racks want filling. Somewhere on the far side of a brick wall, there is a woman with a crossword who will ask me if she lived, and I will get to say yes again.
This is a story about a man nobody wanted, who found out that what stood between a dying city and a living one was a shelf, a price, and somebody willing to count. He never wins with power. He wins by paying attention, by keeping promises to people who could not pay him, by writing down what really happened, and by building something boring enough to go on working when he was not in the room. And the quiet lesson under all of it is that knowledge is worth nothing until somebody carries it to the person who needs it, and that mercy usually costs far less than the men selling it are charging.